My sister ripped up my passport and flushed it down the toilet to force me to stay and watch her kid destroying my $40,500 Monaco trip. She smirked and said, "You are not going anywhere, so now you have to stay." My mother backed her up on speakerphone saying, "Do not be dramatic, Ayana family comes first." The whole family laughed as the water swirled away my freedom. I said nothing. I quietly grabbed my bag and headed for the door. That toilet flush marked the beginning of their absolute downfall. Before I tell you how I sent my sister to federal prison and made my brother-in-law lose his career over a piece of paper, please hit the like button and subscribe. If you have ever been underestimated by your own blood, this story is for you. My name is Ayana, and at 32 years old I had become an expert at living two lives. To the world of high finance in Atlanta, I was a shark, a senior mergers and acquisitions consultant who closed nine-figure deals before breakfast. But to my family, I was just Ayana, the assistant. The spineless little sister who fetched coffee for rich people and lived in a borrowed apartment. I stood in the center of my 3,000-square-foot penthouse, overlooking the Atlanta skyline, carefully folding a silk Givenchy gown into my aluminum Rimowa suitcase. I had told my mother and sister that my boss was in Tokyo for a month and needed me to house sit. It was the only way to explain why I was living in a building where the HOA fees alone cost more than my sister Jasmine's rent. I checked my watch. My flight to Nice, France was in 4 hours. This was not a vacation. I was going to Monaco to finalize the acquisition of Sterling Global, a deal that would net my firm millions and secure my promotion to partner. The trip had cost me $40,500 of my own money upfront for the bookings, a calculated risk I was happy to take. I reached for my glass of vintage Bordeaux, savoring the silence. The peace lasted exactly 10 seconds. The front door banged open. I froze. I had given my mother a spare key for emergencies only, but apparently a Tuesday afternoon counted as an emergency. Jasmine marched in first, dragging my 6-year-old nephew Jackson by the arm. Jackson was screaming about wanting an iPad. Behind them strolled Hunter, Jasmine's husband. Hunter was a 38-year-old white man with the confidence of a CEO, but the bank account of an intern. He worked mid-level management at a logistics firm and loved to remind everyone how he was bringing class to our family. "Nice place your boss has," Hunter said, looking around with a sneer. "Tacky furniture, though. A bit too modern for my taste." He walked over to the kitchen island and picked up my bottle of wine. He poured himself a glass without asking, took a sip, and grimaced. "Ugh, this tastes cheap. Your boss needs to learn that you cannot buy taste." I tightened my grip on my own glass. That bottle was a 1996 Chateau Margaux worth $1,200. Hunter was used to drinking boxed wine that came with a screw top. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have to leave for the airport in an hour." Jasmine dropped her oversized tote bag on my white velvet sofa. "Well, change of plans. The nanny quit this morning. Can you believe the nerve of that girl? She wanted overtime pay just because we came home 3 hours late. Anyway, Hunter and I have a gala to attend tonight. It is very exclusive. We need you to watch Jackson until Sunday." I stared at her. "Sunday, Jasmine? I am leaving the country today. I have a business trip." Hunter laughed. "A business trip, Ayana? You are an executive assistant. Secretaries do not go on business trips to Europe. Just call your boss and tell him you are sick. He is in Tokyo anyway, right? He will never know. I am not canceling my trip," I said, my voice hardening. "This is important." Jasmine's face twisted. "You are so selfish. You always have been. Look at you playing dress-up in your boss's apartment while I am out here struggling to raise a child. Do you know how hard it is to be a mother? No, you do not, because you only care about yourself." She pulled out her phone and dialed our mother, Lorene. She put it on speaker immediately. "Mom, Ayana is refusing to help us. She says she has to go on some fake trip. My mother's voice crackled through the phone, tinny and sharp. Ayana, do not be difficult. Your sister is under a lot of stress. Why do you always have to cause drama? Just stay home and help her. You can go on vacation another time. It is not a vacation, Mom, I said, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest. And I have already paid for everything. It cost $40,000. The room went silent for a second, and then they all burst out laughing. Hunter laughed so hard, he spilled red wine on the countertop. 40,000, Hunter wheezed. Oh my God. You really expect us to believe that? Did you win the lottery? Or are you dating a drug dealer? Ayana, stop lying to try and get out of babysitting. It is pathetic. Jackson, fueled by the tension, started running around the living room, grabbing a crystal sculpture from the coffee table. I lunged forward to stop him, but Jasmine blocked my path. Do not touch him, she snapped. You are not going anywhere. I am leaving Jackson here. If you leave, you are abandoning a child. I took a deep breath. I need to finish packing. Please leave. I turned my back on them and walked into the master bedroom to get my toiletries bag from the ensuite bathroom. My heart was pounding. I just needed to get my passport and get out. I could deal with the stains on the sofa later. I walked into the bathroom and stopped cold. Jasmine was standing there. She had slipped past me while I was arguing with Hunter. She was holding my passport, my blue, valid United States passport. Jasmine, give that to me, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. You think you are better than us, don't you? With your borrowed apartment and your fake fancy job, you need to learn your place, Ayana. She held the passport over the toilet bowl. Do not do it, I warned. She ripped the cover off first, then she tore the pages in half. The sound of the thick paper tearing was louder than a gunshot in the tiled room. She dropped the pieces into the water. Oops, she said. My body went numb. I watched as she reached out and pressed the silver flush button. The water roared. The pages swirled, my visa stamps, my identification, my freedom, all spiraling down into the dark pipes. There, Jasmine dusted her hands off. Problem solved. Now you have to stay. I stood there for a long moment. I did not scream. I did not lunge at her. I simply pulled my phone from my pocket. I had tapped the record button the moment I walked into the bathroom. I had the sound of the tear, the image of her hand on the flush, the look of pure malice on her face. I walked back out to the living room. Hunter was lounging on the sofa, scrolling on his phone. Did you convince her? He asked without looking up. Jasmine walked out behind me, looking triumphant. She is staying. She does not have a choice anymore. I walked past them. I zipped up my Rimowa suitcase. I picked up my handbag. Where do you think you are going? Jasmine screeched. I just flushed your passport. You cannot fly. I did not answer. I walked to the door, opened it, and stepped out into the hallway. Hunter yelled after me. Go ahead. Walk to the airport. They will laugh in your face. You are just doing this for attention. I let the heavy door slam shut, cutting off their voices. The silence of the hallway was instant and cooling. I pressed the button for the elevator and rode it down to the lobby. The concierge Michael saw me coming and immediately signaled the driver of the black SUV waiting outside. Ms. Ayana, you seem tense, Michael said as he held the door open. Is everything all right? Everything is proceeding exactly as it needs to, Michael, I said. Please ensure no one from my unit is allowed back into the building once they leave. Revoke their access codes immediately. I slid into the back of the plush leather seat of the Uber Black. As the car pulled away from the curb, I pulled out my phone. I did not call the police, not yet. That was for later. I dialed the number on the back of my black card, the American Express Centurion card. It rang once. Good afternoon, Ayana, a smooth voice answered. How can we assist you today? I looked out the window as the Atlanta skyline blurred past. I have a situation, I said calmly. My passport has been destroyed by a third party. I have a flight to Nice in 3 hours. I need to activate the emergency diplomatic courier protocol. And get me the number for the FBI field office in Atlanta. I have a federal crime to report. I leaned back and closed my eyes. My sister thought she had trapped me. She thought a toilet flush was the end of the story. She had no idea she had just flushed her own life down the drain. Monaco was waiting, and when I came back, I was bringing hell with me. Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport is the busiest airport in the world, a chaotic sprawl of stressed travelers, screaming children, and endless security lines that snake back and forth like a labyrinth of misery. Usually just stepping onto the curb at the domestic terminal is enough to raise my blood pressure. But today the black SUV did not head toward the main chaotic drop-off points. Instead, the driver turned smoothly onto a secluded access road winding through a series of security checkpoints that most people do not even know exist. We were heading to the private suite terminal, a separate facility reserved for heads of state, A-list celebrities, and members of the ultra-exclusive Centurion tier that my family did not even know existed. As the car glided to a halt, I looked down at my phone. It had been buzzing incessantly in my pocket for the last 45 minutes. 17 missed calls from Jasmine, 5 from my mother, 3 from Hunter. A string of text messages that ranged from furious to demanding. "Where are you?" Jasmine had texted. "Stop playing games and come back up. Jackson is hungry." "You are being childish," my mother had added. "We are family. You do not walk out on family." I swiped the notifications away without opening them. My heart was still hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the escape. The image of the toilet water swirling away my passport was burned into my retinas. It was a violation so personal, so petty, and so permanent that it had severed the last emotional tether I had to them. They thought they had grounded me. They thought that without that little blue book, I was just Ayanna, the assistant, tethered to their needs and their schedule. I stepped out of the car, and the humid Atlanta air was immediately replaced by the climate-controlled, jasmine-scented air of the private terminal. A man in a sharp charcoal suit was waiting for me. This was Julian, the liaison from the emergency travel concierge's service I paid $6,000 a year for. He held a thick manila envelope in his hands. "Ms. Jenkins," Julian said with a nod, his voice calm and professional. "I trust the drive was smooth. We have handled the situation with the State Department." He handed me the envelope. Inside was not a new passport that would take days, but a temporary diplomatic travel document. Because my firm manages mergers that impact national trade infrastructure, I was technically classified as a courier of sensitive economic data. It was a loophole, an expensive and difficult loop to close, but my firm had pulled the strings within 20 minutes of my call. "Thank you, Julian," I said, taking the documents. My hands were steady. "Everything is in order," he explained as he escorted me through a private security scanner that took less than 30 seconds to clear. "Your identity has been verified biometrically. You are cleared for immediate departure. The Emirates team is expecting you." I walked into the private lounge. It was empty save for a famous rapper sitting in the corner speaking quietly into his phone. I ordered a sparkling water and finally sat down. The silence here was heavy and expensive. It was the exact opposite of the noise and clutter of my sister's life. Jasmine thrived on chaos because chaos distracted her from the fact that she was unhappy. She created emergencies so she could feel important by solving them, or more accurately, by forcing me to solve them for her. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a voice note from Hunter. I pressed play, holding the phone up to my ear. "Ayanna, look, this joke has gone on long enough." Hunter's voice sneered, dripping with that patronizing tone he used when he thought he was being the man of the house. "We know you are probably just sitting in a Starbucks down the street. You do not have a passport, you do not have a ticket. Just come back, apologize to your sister, and maybe we will let you take Jackson to the zoo tomorrow as an apology." I let out a short, cold laugh. The zoo. That was what my life was to them. An endless series of obligations to entertain their children and fund their lifestyles. Ms. Jenkins, a softly spoken attendant, appeared at my elbow. "We are ready to board you now. The car is waiting on the tarmac." I stood up, smoothing the front of my silk blouse. I did not walk down a jet bridge. I was driven in a Porsche directly across the tarmac to the waiting massive Airbus A380. I climbed the stairs to the upper deck where the first-class suites were located. If you have never flown Emirates first class, it is difficult to explain that it is not really an airplane seat. It is a private hotel room in the sky. I slid the golden doors of my suite shut, enclosing myself in a cocoon of leather and burled wood. I sat in the zero-gravity seat and accepted a glass of Dom Perignon from the flight attendant who already knew my name and my preference for warm nuts. I took a sip of the champagne. The bubbles were crisp and sharp. I looked out the window as the massive engines began to whine to life. I was about to fly 4,000 miles away from the toxicity that had plagued me for 3 decades. But I knew that if I just disappeared, they would spin the narrative. They would tell everyone I ran away. They would tell the extended family I was having a mental breakdown. They would play the victims. I needed to strike first. I needed to let them know that the dynamic had shifted permanently. I placed the flute of champagne on the polished wood table next to my boarding pass. The boarding pass clearly read, First Class Atlanta, to Nice Seat 1A. The price of this ticket alone was $22,000 more than Hunter made in 4 months. I snapped a photo. Then I opened the family group chat. It was currently filled with messages from Jasmine complaining about how hard it was to find a babysitter at the last minute and how selfish I was. I attached the photo. Then I typed a simple message. Problem solved. See you in court. I hit send just as the plane began its taxi. I watched the 3 bubbles appear immediately. They were reading it, then the phone exploded. Jasmine was the first to reply. What is this? Is this Google Images? You are lying. You do not have your passport. I flushed it. Then another message from her. Who paid for this? Did you steal from your boss? I am calling the police, Ayana. You cannot afford this. I watched the messages roll in with a detached sense of satisfaction. She was panicking. She was trying to reconcile the sister she thought she knew. The pushover, the assistant, the scapegoat, with the image on her screen. The cognitive dissonance was breaking her brain. Then came the text from my mother. Ayana, this is extremely irresponsible. Spending money like this when your sister is struggling, and lying to us about a business trip. You need to come home immediately and explain yourself. We are family. I took another sip of champagne. Family. That word had been used as a weapon against me for as long as I could remember. Family meant I had to give. Family meant they got to take. Family meant I had to dim my light so Jasmine would not feel overshadowed. Then finally the text from Hunter. I stared at it. Hunter was not screaming like Jasmine. He was doing math. Wait a second, he texted. I know that logo. That is Emirates first class. That ticket is like 20 grand. Ayana, where did you get 20 grand? And how did you get past TSA without a passport? Something is not right here. He was right. Something was not right. For the first time in his life, Hunter was realizing that he did not know who I was. He was realizing that the sister-in-law he mocked for her cheap wine and boring job was sitting in a seat that cost more than his car. I could see him showing the phone to Jasmine. I could imagine the scene in my penthouse, the silence falling over the room as the reality set in. They were not just dealing with a runaway sister. They were dealing with someone with resources they could not comprehend. My phone buzzed one last time before the flight attendant asked us to switch to airplane mode. It was a private message from Jasmine. You think you are special, you are nothing. You are going to come back here and I am going to make you pay for leaving me. You ruined my night. I smiled. Ruining her night was just the appetizer. I was about to ruin her entire life. I switched my phone to airplane mode. The connection was cut. The stream of abuse stopped. The silence in the suite was absolute. As the plane roared down the runway and lifted into the sky, pushing me back into the soft leather seat, I felt a weight lift off my chest that I had been carrying since I was a child. I looked down at the clouds falling away beneath us. Somewhere down there in the sprawling mess of Atlanta, My sister was staring at a toilet bowl, realizing that the flush she thought was a power move was actually the sound of her own future spiraling down the drain. I closed my eyes and let the luxury surround me. Next stop, Monaco. Next stop, the truth. And after that, the reckoning. The morning sun over Monte Carlo hit the Mediterranean Sea with a brilliance that felt almost aggressive. From the balcony of my suite at the Hotel de Paris, the yachts bobbing in the harbor looked like white bath toys floating in a tub of turquoise ink. I took a sip of my espresso and inhaled the salty, expensive air. It was a stark, almost violent contrast to the smell of mildew and cheap air freshener that permeated my sister Jasmine's house in Atlanta. 24 hours ago, I had been standing in a cramped bathroom, watching my identity swirl down a porcelain bowl. Now I was wearing a cream-colored Alexander McQueen suit that cost more than my brother-in-law Hunter's entire wardrobe, preparing to close a deal that would reshape the logistics industry in the southern United States. I checked my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. The woman staring back at me was not Ayana the doormat. She was not Ayana the assistant who fetched coffee and babysat unruly nephews. This was Ayana Jenkins, senior partner at Horizon Capital, the woman who held the power of economic life and death over companies worth billions. My family did not know this woman. They chose not to know her because acknowledging my success would force them to confront their own mediocrity. I picked up my briefcase, a slender leather piece from Hermes, and headed out the door. The meeting was set for 10 o'clock in the private diamond room of the casino, a space reserved for conversations that were too sensitive for boardrooms. As I walked through the lobby, the concierge nodded deferentially. "Good morning, Ms. Jenkins. Your car is ready." I stepped into the waiting Bentley. The drive was short, but it gave me time to center myself. My phone had been silent since I blocked them all, but the phantom weight of their demands still sat on my shoulder. I pushed it away. Today was about business. I walked into the diamond room and Charles Sterling stood up immediately. He was a tall, silver-haired man with the kind of posture that came from 3 generations of old money. He was the CEO of Sterling Global, the logistics giant my firm was acquiring. To the world, he was a titan of industry. To me, he was a man who needed my capital to save his legacy from bankruptcy. "Ayana," he said, extending a hand. "You look refreshed. I trust the flight was comfortable." "It was excellent, Charles," I said, taking the seat opposite him. The waiter poured sparkling water into crystal glasses without making a sound. "Let us skip the pleasantries. I have reviewed the final valuation of the Atlanta distribution hubs. My team found some inefficiencies in the middle management structure that we need to address before we sign." Charles sighed, looking suddenly tired. He sat back in his velvet chair. "You have a sharp eye, Ayana. That is why I like doing business with you. You do not miss a thing." "Yes, the Atlanta branch has been a headache. We have a culture problem down there. Too many managers thinking they run the place, spending company money like it is their own personal piggy bank." I opened my file. "We can restructure," I said calmly. "Cut the dead weight, streamline the operations. That is part of the acquisition strategy. We are looking at a 30% reduction in redundant personnel." Charles nodded. "I agree. Ideally, I would like to clean house before the merger is public. I do not want the shareholders panicking about internal rot." Speaking of rot, I had a particularly irritating report this morning from compliance regarding that exact branch. I paused, my pen hovering over the contract. "Oh, is it material to the deal?" "Not financially material," Charles said, waving a hand dismissively. "But it is indicative of the stupidity we are dealing with. We have this mid-level manager in logistics, a guy named Hunter. Last name is Vance, I think. He has been trying to expense a family vacation to Disney World as a team-building retreat." Can you believe the audacity? I froze. My blood ran cold and then immediately hot. The name hung in the air between us. Hunter, Vance. I slowly set my pen down. I kept my face perfectly neutral, a skill I had perfected over years of listening to my mother criticize my life choices without flinching. Hunter Vance, I repeated. Mid-level logistics manager. Atlanta branch. Yes, that is the one, Charles grumbled, oblivious to the bomb he had just dropped. He is a loudmouth, too. Apparently, he goes around telling the warehouse staff that he is personal friends with me. I have never met the man in my life. HR tells me he has been flagged for harassment twice, but his direct supervisor keeps covering for him. Honestly, I was planning to fire him next week just to save myself the headache of reading his ridiculous expense reports. I leaned back in my chair. A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. It was the kind of smile a shark gives before it drags a seal under the water. The universe does not often hand you a loaded gun on a silver platter, but when it does, you take aim. Hunter had spent the last 5 years belittling me. He had mocked my job. He had laughed when my passport was flushed. He had called me a glorified secretary. And all this time he was a low-level employee in the very company I was buying. He was not just a cog in the machine. He was a cog in my machine. Charles, I said, my voice smooth as silk. Do not fire him yet. Charles looked at me confused. Why not? The man is a liability. Because I said, leaning forward and locking eyes with him. There is a conflict of interest I need to disclose. A very personal one. I took a sip of water, letting the suspense build. Charles was watching me closely. Hunter Vance is my brother-in-law, I said. Charles dropped his fork. It clattered against the china plate. You are joking. I am not. He is married to my sister. Charles looked horrified. His face went pale. Ayanna, I had no idea. My apologies. If I had known he was your family, I would never have spoken so candidly. I can make sure he is taken care of. If you want us to promote him or move him to a better position to keep the peace, consider it done. We do not want to upset a senior partner over a personnel issue. I laughed. It was a genuine dark laugh that startled the waiter. No, Charles, I said. You misunderstand me. I do not want you to promote him. I picked up my phone and unlocked it. I scrolled to the photo of the flushed passport that I had saved from the video. I turned the screen around and slid it across the mahogany table toward the billionaire CEO. This is what your employee did to me yesterday, I said. His wife destroyed my passport to prevent me from coming to this meeting. He stood by and laughed while she did it. He called me a liar and a secretary. He thinks I am here on a vacation I cannot afford. Charles stared at the image of the torn passport floating in the toilet bowl. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock. This is barbaric. He thinks I am an assistant, Charles, I continued. He has no idea that I am the one signing the check that saves his company. He has no idea that I am effectively his new boss. Charles sat up straighter. The shock in his eyes was replaced by a look of understanding. He was a businessman. He understood power, and he understood revenge. What do you want to do? Charles asked, his voice low. I want him to keep his job for exactly 3 more days, I said. I want him to feel safe. I want him to think he has gotten away with everything. And then when I return to Atlanta, I want to be the one to deliver the news. I pulled the contract toward me. I want a clause added to this merger agreement, I said, tapping the paper. A specific stipulation regarding the restructuring of the Atlanta Logistics Department. I want full autonomy over the personnel decisions for that specific branch. Charles pulled a gold pen from his pocket. He smiled, and for the first time it was a conspiratorial smile. Done, he said. Anything else? Yes, I said. When you reject his expense report for Disney World, send him an email. Tell him that the decision came from the very top. Tell him that the new ownership group is scrutinizing every penny. Make him sweat. Consider it done, Charles said. He signed the paper and pushed it back to me. I signed my name next to his. Ayanna Jenkins. The ink flowed smoothly onto the page. With that signature, I had just authorized a $500 million transfer, and I had just signed Hunter's professional death warrant. We spent the rest of the lunch discussing the finer points of the acquisition, but a part of my brain was already back in Atlanta. I imagined Hunter walking into his office tomorrow smug and arrogant, telling his co-workers how he put his sister-in-law in her place. I imagined him bragging about his imaginary friendship with Charles Sterling. He was a dead man walking. He just did not know it yet. As we wrapped up the meeting, Charles shook my hand. "It is a pleasure doing business with you, Ayana. And I must say, I am looking forward to seeing how you handle the Atlanta situation. It is rare to see justice served so poetically." I walked out of the casino and into the blinding afternoon sun. The air felt cleaner. The colors seemed brighter. I checked my phone. There were 12 new messages from Hunter. He was asking if I could loan him $500 because his credit card had been declined at the grocery store. I typed a reply. "I am a little busy right now, Hunter. I am in a meeting with your boss." I deleted the text before sending it. No, that was too easy. Silence was better. Let him wonder. Let him stew. I put the phone away and signaled for my driver. "Take me to the nearest Hermes boutique," I said. "I need to buy a gift for my sister." I was going to buy her a scarf. A beautiful silk scarf. Something she would love. Something she would think was a peace offering. And when I gave it to her just before I destroyed her life, I would whisper in her ear that it cost more than her husband made in a month. The game had changed. They were playing checkers with a toddler. I was playing chess with a grandmaster, and I had just captured their queen. The vibrating phone danced across the marble tabletop like a nervous beetle. It was late in Monaco, the kind of deep velvet night where the only sounds were the distant rhythm of the Mediterranean waves and the soft clinking of ice in crystal tumblers. I was sitting in the private library of the Hotel de Paris with Charles Sterling. We had spent the last 3 hours going over the finer points of the acquisition strategy, and the mood was one of quiet professional intimacy. Charles was reviewing a digital portfolio on his tablet, a glass of aged cognac resting near his hand. But across the ocean in Atlanta, it was late afternoon, and my family was busy tearing my life apart. I glanced at the screen of my phone. It was a notification from my smart home security system. Motion detected in master bedroom. My stomach tightened. I had locked that door. I had specifically installed a heavy-duty deadbolt on my bedroom door precisely because I knew my sister Jasmine had no concept of boundaries. But a lock is only a deterrent for honest people, and my family had proven yesterday that they were anything but honest. "Excuse me for a moment, Charles," I said softly. "I just need to check a security alert from my home." Charles nodded without looking up. "Take your time, Ayana." I opened the app and the live feed loaded instantly. The high-definition camera, hidden discreetly inside a smoke detector, gave me a panoramic view of my sanctuary. The room I had worked so hard to curate with its calming beige tones and minimalist furniture was currently a crime scene in progress. On the screen I watched my mother Laureen. She was holding a screwdriver. My mother, the woman who sang in the church choir and lectured me about propriety, was jamming a metal tool into the doorframe of my bedroom. Jasmine was standing right behind her, urging her on. "Harder, Mom." Jasmine said, her voice tinny but clear through the microphone. "She definitely hides cash in there. You saw the way she was acting. She has money." I watched in silence as the wood splintered. With a final heave, the lock gave way and the door swung open. They stumbled inside like pirates boarding a captured ship. It was not just a violation of privacy, it was a violation of my soul. This was the one space I had carved out for myself, the one place where I did not have to be the scapegoat, and they were defiling it with their greed. They began to tear the room apart. Jasmine went straight for the closet. I watched her pulling down my silk blouses, throwing my blazers onto the floor, stomping on them with her dirty sneakers. She was looking for a safe or a shoebox of cash, anything she could steal. My mother went to the vanity. She started opening drawers, dumping out my jewelry. "There is nothing here," Jasmine screamed, kicking a pile of my clothes. "It is just clothes and papers. Where is the money? Where did she get the money for that flight?" Then it happened. Jasmine, in a fit of blind temper, swept her arm across the top of my dresser. No, I whispered to the empty air in Monaco. On the dresser sat a vase. It was not just a decoration. It was a kintsugi piece I had bought in Kyoto 3 years ago. It was ancient pottery that had been broken and repaired with gold lacquer, a metaphor for my own life. It had cost me $5,000, but its sentimental value was priceless. Jasmine's arm connected with the porcelain. The vase flew off the dresser and shattered against the hardwood floor. The sound was a sharp, heartbreaking crash that echoed through the speakers of my phone. Oops, Jasmine sneered, looking down at the shards. Ugly old thing anyway. My hand shook as I held the phone. I felt a cold, white rage settling in my chest. It was different from the anger I felt at the passport incident. That was impulsive. This was malicious. This was a targeted attack on my peace. Then my phone screen changed. The camera feed cut out as an incoming call took over. It was Hunter. I looked up at Charles. He had stopped reading and was watching me. He saw the color drain from my face. He saw the way my jaw was set. Is everything all right, Ayana? He asked, concern etching his forehead. I looked at the phone, then at the man who technically employed the monster on the other end of the line. This was it. The moment of convergence. Charles I said, my voice steady but deadly serious. Do you remember the employee we discussed? The one who works in your Atlanta logistics hub? Hunter Vance, Charles asked. Yes. He is calling me right now, I said. My family just broke into my home. They are destroying my property. And now I believe they are calling to gloat. Charles's expression turned from concern to disgust. I want you to hear this, I said. I want you to know exactly who is representing your company. I placed the phone in the center of the marble table between the crystal decanter and the leather-bound contracts. I took a deep breath. I swiped green to answer and immediately hit the speakerphone button. Hello, Hunter, I said. The voice that exploded from the phone was so loud it made the ice in our glasses tremble. Where the hell is the money? Ayana. Hunter sounded deranged. I could hear the background noise of my apartment. I could hear Jasmine yelling in the distance. I do not know what you are talking about, I said calmly. And why are you in my bedroom? Don't play dumb with me, Hunter roared. We are in here looking for the cash you stole. You think you can just fly off to Europe first class? We know you are a fraud. You are just a secretary. We are going to find your stash, and we are going to take what we are owed for babysitting your miserable life. Charles. Sterling's eyes went wide. He sat up straight, staring at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Hunter, I said, keeping my voice level. You are breaking and entering. You just destroyed a $5,000 vase. I have it all on camera. I do not care about your stupid camera, Hunter screamed. And I do not care about your vase. You owe us. I am the man of this family. I bring home the paycheck. You are nothing. And when you come crawling back, you are going to beg us to forgive you. He was slurring his words slightly. He was clearly drunk on the wine he had stolen from my kitchen. I am going to destroy everything in this room until you tell me where the money is, Hunter threatened. I will burn this whole fake life of yours to the ground. Charles Sterling had heard enough. He reached out and touched my arm gently, signaling me to be silent. Then the billionaire CEO leaned forward toward the phone. Mr. Vance, Charles said, his voice dropping an octave, resonating with the absolute authority of a man who owned fleets of ships and airplanes. There was a confused silence on the other end of the line. Hunter paused. Who is this? Hunter barked. Is this your little boyfriend, Ayana? Put him on. Let me tell him what a fraud you are. Mr. Vance, Charles repeated, colder this time. This is Charles Sterling. The silence that followed was heavy, thick, and suffocating. It lasted for 5 seconds. Who? Hunter asked, his voice wavering slightly. Charles Sterling, the CEO, repeated. The founder of the company you currently work for. Although after listening to you threaten a woman and admit to a felony, I suppose I should say the company you used to work for. On the other end of the line, I heard a gasp. It might have been Jasmine. I Hunter stammered. The arrogance evaporated instantly. Is this a prank? Ayanna, stop playing games with soundboards. It is not a prank, son, Charles said. I am sitting here with Ms. Jenkins in Monaco. We are finalizing a merger, and you have just provided me with the most compelling reason I have ever heard to restructure my workforce. There was a sound of shuffling. I could hear Hunter breathing hard. Mr. Sterling Hunter's voice was a whimper now. Sir, we were just... It is a family dispute. It has nothing to do with work. It has everything to do with character. Mr. Vance Charles cut him off, and yours is evidently bankrupt. I suggest you leave Miss Jenkins's property immediately. The police are likely on their way, and I would hate for my company to be associated with your arrest record any more than it already is. But, sir, Hunter pleaded. Goodbye, Mr. Vance Charles said. I reached out and ended the call. The silence returned to the library, but the energy had shifted completely. The room felt charged with electricity. Charles picked up his cognac and took a long sip. He looked shaken. I apologize, Ayanna, he said. I had no idea it was that bad. That man is a lunatic. I picked up my phone and saved the recording of the call. I saved the video clip of the vase shattering. I forwarded both files to my lawyer, Mr. Vance, no relation to Hunter, thank God. Do not apologize, Charles, I said. You just helped me solve a problem that has been plaguing me for years. Charles shook his head. He is finished. I will have HR draft the termination paperwork first thing in the morning. He will be escorted out of the building before he can even turn on his computer. Thank you, I said. But Charles, I added, looking him in the eye, let's stick to the plan. Let him sweat for a few days. Let him wonder if it was really you. Let him live in the terror of the unknown. And when I get back to Atlanta, I want to be the one to look him in the eye when the hammer drops. Charles smiled. It was a grim smile. You are a terrifying woman, Ayanna. I looked at the black screen of my phone, thinking of the shards of my kintsugi vase lying on the floor of my bedroom. I had to learn to be, I said. Survival required it. I stood up. I need to make one more call, Charles, to the Atlanta Police Department. They are currently trespassing on my property. Do what you must, Charles said. I walked out to the balcony. The night air was cool. I dialed the non-emergency number for the Atlanta police. I reported a break-in in progress. I gave them the address. I told them the perpetrators were violent and intoxicated. As I hung up, I looked out at the lights of the yachts reflecting on the water. I felt a strange sense of peace. The vase was broken. My room was trashed. But the illusion was shattered too. Hunter had exposed himself to the one person who could destroy his career. Jasmine had exposed herself to the camera. They had dug their own graves. I was just standing here thousands of miles away holding the shovel. I went back inside to finish my cognac. The game was escalating, and I was winning. The sunlight streaming into the private boardroom of the Hotel de Paris was blindingly bright, a stark contrast to the dark storm I was about to unleash on my family back in Atlanta. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, a heavy fountain pen in my hand. Across from me, Charles Sterling sat with his legal team, looking tired but relieved. The merger was done. The papers were stacked in neat piles waiting for the final ink that would transfer ownership of Sterling Global to my firm, Horizon Capital. But there was one final document that needed my attention. It was a single sheet of paper, a supplemental addendum to the main acquisition agreement. It was titled simply, Personnel Restructuring and Compliance Review of the Atlanta Regional Hub. To the lawyers in the room, it looked like standard corporate jargon, a boring clause about efficiency and streamlining operations. But to me and to Charles, it was a loaded gun. I read the paragraph slowly, savoring every word. It granted me, Ayanna Jenkins, absolute and unilateral authority to terminate any employee within the Atlanta branch who violated company ethics, misused company funds, or engaged in conduct detrimental to the brand's reputation. It specifically retroacted to include conduct that occurred up to 30 days prior to the signing of the deal. I looked up at Charles. He gave me a small, grim nod. He knew exactly who this clause was written for. It was written for Hunter Vance. It was written for the man who had screamed at me over the phone while my mother pried open my bedroom door with a screwdriver. I pressed the nib of the pen to the paper. The ink flowed dark and permanent. I signed my name with a flourish. With that simple motion, I had effectively ended Hunter's career. He was no longer just an incompetent employee. He was my employee, and I was about to become the most demanding boss he had ever imagined. "Thank you," Ayanna, Charles said as his lawyers collected the documents. "I believe this is the beginning of a very profitable future for all of us. And regarding the Atlanta matter, I trust you will handle it with your usual precision." "I will, Charles," I said, capping the pen. "Precision is exactly the word I would use." I stood up and shook his hand. The meeting was over. The business was concluded. Now the real work began. I walked out of the conference room and took the elevator up to the rooftop terrace. I needed fresh air. I needed to clear the smell of ink and money from my lungs so I could focus on the next phase of my plan. The corporate execution was set in motion. Now it was time for the criminal execution. I walked to the edge of the terrace and looked out over the Mediterranean Sea. It was beautiful, but my mind was 4,000 miles away inside the dirty, cluttered mind of my sister Jasmine. She thought she had won. She thought that by flushing my passport, she had exerted control over me. She thought she was teaching me a lesson in humility. I pulled my phone from my blazer pocket. I did not call the police, not yet. Police officers on the beat were often overworked and dismissive of domestic disputes. They might look at a torn passport and call it a civil matter. They might look at a family break-in and call it a misunderstanding. I needed someone who understood that this was not a dispute. This was a federal crime. I dialed a number I had saved years ago but never had to use. It belonged to Marcus Garrison, a former federal prosecutor who now ran a high-end private investigation and legal consulting firm in Atlanta. He was the kind of man you called when you wanted to destroy someone legally, thoroughly, and without mercy. "Ayanna Jenkins." Marcus answered on the second ring. His voice was deep and gravelly. "I have not heard from you since the chaotic merger in Chicago." "To what do I owe the pleasure? I need you to open a file, Marcus," I said, skipping the small talk. "A criminal file. I am preparing a submission for the FBI and the District Attorney's Office, and I want it to be bulletproof before I even land in the United States." "I am listening," Marcus said. The tone of his voice shifted instantly from social to professional. "I am sending you 2 video files right now," I said, tapping the screen to upload the footage I had backed up to the cloud. "The first video is from yesterday afternoon. It shows my sister Jasmine Vance taking my valid United States passport, tearing it in half and flushing it down a toilet." There was a pause on the line. "She flushed your passport?" Marcus asked, sounding genuinely surprised. "Yes," I said. "To prevent me from traveling on business. That is a violation of Title 18 United States Code Section 1594. Marcus recited immediately. "Whoever knowingly and willfully destroys any passport or other instrument in the nature of a passport. That is a federal felony, Ayanna. We are talking about potential prison time. It is not just property damage. It is interference with federal identification documents." "Exactly," I said, watching a seagull dive into the ocean. "But there is more." The second video is from last night. My security cameras caught my mother, Laureen Jenkins, and my sister breaking into my locked bedroom in my penthouse. You will see them using a screwdriver to force the lock. You will see them ransacking my personal belongings. You will hear them discussing their intent to find and steal cash. And you will see them destroy a piece of art valued at $5,000. I heard the sound of typing on the other end of the line. Marcus was already taking notes. "Burglary," Marcus muttered. "Forced entry, conspiracy to commit theft, malicious destruction of property." And since they were looking for large sums of cash, we can argue predatory intent. "Ayanna, this is heavy stuff. These are your family members." They share my DNA. Marcus, I said coldly. But they are not my family. Not anymore. Understood, Marcus said. What is the objective here? Do you want a restraining order? Do you want a settlement? I want them indicted, I said. I want the book thrown at them. I want the passport charge to stick because it carries federal weight. It forces the case out of local jurisdiction and onto a federal docket, which means they cannot cry their way out of it with a sympathetic local judge. I want the burglary charge to decimate their standing in the community, and I want full restitution for every single penny the trip cost, plus damages for the emotional distress and the security breach. I paused, letting the anger fuel my next words. I want them to understand that actions have consequences. They think they can bully me because I am the little sister. They think the law stops at the front door of a family home. I want you to prove them wrong. I have received the files, Marcus said. I am watching the passport video now. My God. The look on her face. She is smiling. She is proud of it, I said. She thinks it is funny. She will not be laughing when the federal agents knock on her door, Marcus said grimly. The video is clear. The intent is undeniable. She explicitly states now you have to stay. That proves the motive was to restrict your freedom of movement. That is technically a form of unlawful imprisonment or coercion, though the passport charge is easier to prove. Draft the complaint I ordered. Have it ready for me to sign the moment I touch down in Atlanta. And Marcus, I want you to find out everything you can about their finances. I know my mother has a second mortgage. I know Hunter has credit card debt. I want a full forensic accounting of their liabilities. When I sue them for damages, I want to know exactly what assets they have to lose. I am on it, Marcus said. I will have a full dossier ready in 24 hours. Ayana. I have to ask, are you sure about this? Once we file these federal charges, there is no going back. The U.S. attorney takes passport fraud very seriously. Your sister could be looking at actual prison time, not just probation. I looked down at my hand. I wasn't wearing any rings, but I felt the phantom weight of the years of servitude I had endured. I remembered the birthdays they forgot. I remembered the way they dismissed my career. I remembered the sound of that toilet flushing the sound of my hard work and my freedom being treated like waste. I am sure, I said. Prepare the paperwork. I hung up the phone. My hand was trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the release of adrenaline. It was done. The mechanism of justice was grinding into gear. I walked back into the hotel suite. The room was quiet and luxurious. I sat down on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. I had one more email to write. I pulled up the employee directory for the Atlanta branch of Sterling Global. I found the email address for the HR director. Subject: immediate review of employment status, Hunter Vance. I began typing. I did not write as a sister-in-law. I wrote as a senior partner of the acquiring firm. I requested a full audit of his expense reports for the last 5 years. I requested a log of his internet usage on company time. I requested statements from his subordinates regarding his management style. I was building a cage for Hunter bar by bar. By the time I returned, he would be trapped. He would have no job, no money, and a wife facing federal charges. I closed the laptop and walked to the minibar. I poured myself a glass of water. I needed to stay hydrated. I needed to stay sharp. The flight back to Atlanta was tomorrow. Most people return from a vacation with souvenirs. I was returning with a federal indictment and a termination letter. I looked at the empty space in my luggage where my passport should have been. Jasmine had taken that from me. She had taken a small blue book. But in exchange, she had given me something far more dangerous. She had given me a reason to stop caring. For 30 years, I had tried to be the good daughter. I had tried to be the helpful sister. I had tried to buy their love with silence and compliance. But the currency had changed. The price of admission to my life was now respect, and they were bankrupt. I lay back on the plush pillows of the hotel bed. I closed my eyes. For the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about what my family would think. I wasn't worried about their drama. I was the storm now. and they were just standing on the shore watching the water recede, having no idea that a tsunami was coming. Tomorrow I would go home. Tomorrow the war would officially begin. The tires of the Emirates Airbus, a 380, touched down on the tarmac of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport with a heavy, decisive thud. It was the sound of a judge's gavel hitting the desk. I was back in Atlanta. The flight from Nice had been 12 hours of luxury champagne and lie-flat beds, but I had not slept for a single minute. My mind had been too busy rehearsing the next 48 hours, playing out every possible variation of the confrontation, like a chess master analyzing a board. Most people return from a trip to the French Riviera with a tan and a bag full of duty-free chocolate. I was returning with a federal indictment strategy and a burning desire for total scorched earth justice. I bypassed the main terminal entirely. My temporary diplomatic travel documents, arranged by Charles Sterling's connections and my firm's security team, allowed me to be processed through a private customs facility. The officer stamped the temporary paper without a word, his face impassive. He had no idea that the woman standing in front of him in a $3,000 suit was technically homeless, her apartment currently occupied by a family of squatters who shared her last name. I walked out into the humid Georgia afternoon. The air felt heavy, sticky, and familiar. It smelled like asphalt and pine needles. A black Suburban was waiting for me, engine idling. The driver, a large man named Quiet and Professional, held the door open. "Welcome back, Ms. Jenkins," he said. "Where to the penthouse?" I paused. My body screamed for a shower. My heart ached to go to my sanctuary, kick my sister out, and collapse into my own bed. But I knew that if I went home now, I would just be Ayanna the sister. There would be screaming. There would be crying. My mother would guilt-trip me. Hunter would try to intimidate me. The lines would be blurred by emotion and history. "No," I said, sliding into the cool leather interior. "Take me to the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office on Chelsea Circle." The driver did not blink. He simply nodded and closed the door. We merged onto the interstate, the city of Atlanta rising up around us. I watched the skyline pass by the glass towers reflecting the sun. Somewhere in one of those buildings, Hunter was sitting at his desk, likely staring at the termination email that was already sitting in his inbox, though he probably had not read it yet. Somewhere in the suburbs, my mother was probably pacing around my kitchen, wondering why I hadn't called to beg for forgiveness. They were playing a game of emotional chicken. They expected me to come home, cry, apologize for running away, and then pay for the vase they broke. They expected the cycle of abuse to continue because it always had, but they had never met this version of me. We pulled up to the FBI field office. It was a fortress of concrete and glass, a building designed to intimidate. Standing on the steps, checking his watch, was Marcus Garrison. Marcus was the kind of lawyer who made other lawyers nervous. He was impeccably dressed in a navy suit that fit him like a second skin. He did not smile when he saw me. He simply extended a hand. "Ayanna," he said, his grip was firm. Grip was, "You look like you are ready for war." "I am," I said. "Do you have the paperwork?" "All of it," Marcus replied, tapping the leather briefcase at his side. "I have already spoken with Special Agent Miller. He is expecting us." He was skeptical over the phone, as they usually are with domestic disputes, but I told him this involves international commerce and federal property. We walked through the security checkpoint. The metal detectors beeped, the guards checked our IDs. The atmosphere was sterile and cold. It was the perfect environment for what I needed to do. There was no room for motherly guilt here. There was only the law. Special Agent Miller was waiting for us in a small soundproof interview room. He was a man in his 50s, with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. He looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and impatience. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "Mr. Garrison here tells me you want to file a report regarding a passport. Usually lost or damaged passports are handled by the State Department's administrative office. You fill out a form, you pay a fee, you get a new one. Coming to the FBI seems like overkill. I sat down. I placed my hands on the metal table. I looked Agent Miller in the eye. It would be administrative if my dog had chewed at Agent Miller, I said. Or if I had accidentally run it through the washing machine. But this was not an accident. This was a targeted act of destruction designed to hold me hostage against my will. Marcus stepped in, his voice smooth and authoritative. Agent Miller, we are filing a formal complaint under Title 18 U.S. Code Section 1594. As you know, a United States passport is not the personal property of the bearer. It remains the property of the United States government at all times. Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. Whoever knowingly and willfully destroys any passport, Marcus quoted the statute from memory, looking at the agent. That is the law, and we have evidence of willful destruction. Agent Miller leaned back, crossing his arms. Okay, let's see it. Marcus placed the tablet on the table and pressed play. The video filled the screen. The sound of my bathroom acoustics was sharp and clear. There was Jasmine standing by the toilet. The look on her face was not one of anger. It was worse. It was a smirk. It was the look of someone who enjoyed causing pain. I watched Agent Miller's face as the video played. He watched Jasmine tear the blue booklet in half. He heard the distinct sound of the heavy paper ripping. He watched her drop it into the water. Oops, the video, Jasmine said. Now you have to stay. The flush roared. Marcus paused the video on the final frame, Jasmine's triumphant, cruel smile. That, Marcus said, pointing to the screen, is a confession. She explicitly states her motive. Now you have to stay. She destroyed federal property to restrict the movement of a United States citizen. Agent Miller was silent for a moment. He picked up the tablet and watched the clip again. She is your sister? He asked, looking at me. Biologically, yes, I said. But in that moment, she was a criminal. Agent Miller sighed. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. Look, Ms. Jenkins, I get it. It's nasty. But usually we reserve federal resources for terrorism, trafficking, large-scale fraud. A sisterly spat? It is not just a spat, I interrupted, my voice rising just enough to command the room. Agent Miller, do you know what I do for a living? He shook his head. I am a senior partner at Horizon Capital, I said. I manage mergers and acquisitions in the 9-figure range. That trip to Monaco was not a vacation. It was to close the acquisition of Sterling Global. My passport is a tool of international commerce. When she destroyed it, she didn't just inconvenience me, she jeopardized a $500 million deal. She interfered with my ability to conduct business that affects the U.S. economy. I leaned forward. Furthermore, I continued, my firm handles sensitive economic data. I have courier status. By destroying my credentials, she compromised my security clearance. If I had been carrying classified documents, she would be in Guantanamo right now. Marcus nodded. We are also filing charges for the break-in that occurred 24 hours later. We have video of them forcing a lock and destroying art. This establishes a pattern of escalating criminal behavior. Ms. Jenkins fears for her safety and her property. Agent Miller looked at the video again. He looked at the smirk on Jasmine's face. He looked at the confident, powerful woman sitting across from him. He realized that this was not going to go away. If I decline to investigate, Marcus added softly, we will take this directly to the U.S. Attorney's Office with a formal complaint that the Bureau refused to enforce Section 1594 despite video evidence of a felony. Agent Miller held up a hand. That won't be necessary, Counselor. He pulled a file folder toward him. You are right, Miller said. The law is the law. And that, he pointed at the frozen image of Jasmine. That is malicious. She knew exactly what she was doing. He clicked his pen. All right, we will open a case. Unauthorized destruction of government documents. We can tag on the interference with commerce aspect to give it more teeth. Where is the suspect now? She is at my residence, I said. 4004, Peachtree Road. Penthouse B. Miller wrote down the address. He looked up at me. Do you want us to just send a summons? No, I said. My voice was cold steel. They are currently trespassing in my home. They have destroyed property. They are likely intoxicated. I want them removed, and I want her arrested. Miller nodded slowly. He picked up his phone. I will send a team over to execute a warrant for the passport violation and assist local PD with the trespassing. Thank you, Agent Miller, I said. I stood up. My legs felt steady. My hands were not shaking. Marcus walked me out to the car. You know what happens next, right? Marcus asked as we stood on the sidewalk. Once the feds show up, there is no unringing that bell. She will have a federal record. She will lose her right to vote. She will never pass a background check. I put on my sunglasses, shielding my eyes from the Atlanta sun. She flushed my freedom down a toilet, Marcus, I said. She tried to make me small. She tried to make me stay. I opened the car door. She wanted me to stay fine. Now she gets to stay. In a federal holding cell. I got into the car. Driver, I said. Take me to the corner of Peachtree and Lenox. I want to watch. The car pulled away. I was not going home to fight. I was going home to watch the fireworks. The unannounced return was complete. The trap was sprung. And Jasmine, the golden child, was about to learn that in the real world, tantrums resulted in handcuffs, not hugs. The smell of burning charcoal and cheap marinade hung heavy in the humid Atlanta air. My mother's backyard was a perfectly manicured stage for the performance my family called a life. To the casual observer, it looked like the American dream in high definition. There were string lights twinkling in the twilight, a cooler full of domestic beer, and 20 or 30 guests milling about holding paper plates loaded with potato salad and ribs. These were the neighbors, the church members, and the lower-level colleagues Hunter was trying to impress. They were the audience my family desperately needed to validate their existence. Hunter stood by the massive stainless steel grill holding a pair of tongs like a scepter. He was wearing a polo shirt that was slightly too tight across the stomach, sweat beading on his forehead as he held court. I watched from the tinted window of the black SUV parked down the street, but I did not need to hear him to know exactly what he was saying. I had heard the script 1,000 times. He was bragging. He was inflating his importance. He was telling lies that were so big they almost sounded like truth. I cracked the window just an inch. The sound of his booming voice drifted down the block. Yeah, well, Sterling and I go way back. Hunter was shouting to a man named Davis who lived 2 doors down. We have an understanding. When this merger goes through, I am looking at a regional director position. Maybe even VP. The old man trusts me. He knows I am the only one who knows how to run the logistics down here. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. The delusion was breathtaking. This man who had been fired via a clause I wrote into a contract 6 hours ago was standing there flipping burgers and promising promotions he would never see. He was a dead man, walking celebrating a future that had already been cancelled. Sitting at the patio table, my sister Jasmine was holding court of her own. She was leaning back in a lawn chair, sipping a glass of white wine. On her face, shielding her eyes from the fading sun, was a pair of oversized tortoiseshell sunglasses. My stomach tightened. Those were my sunglasses. They were vintage Celine valued at $600. I had left them on my dresser the day I flew out. She must have swiped them during the break-in. She was literally wearing the evidence of her crime on her face, parading my property in front of the neighborhood as if she had earned it. She was laughing at something a neighbor said, throwing her head back. Oh, you know, Ayana, Jasmine's voice carried over the fence. She is always so dramatic. She ran off to Europe on some last-minute whim, probably chasing a man. I had to step in and handle everything here. It is exhausting being the responsible one, but that is what family does. My mother, Laureen, bustled out of the kitchen with a tray of deviled eggs. She looked flustered but happy. This was her element. As long as the neighbors thought we were perfect, she was content. She patted Jasmine on the shoulder and whispered something that made them both giggle. They looked like co-conspirators. They looked safe. Then the atmosphere shifted. It started as a low rumble, a vibration that you felt in your chest before you heard it. Then came the tires screeching on asphalt. Two Atlanta Police Department cruisers turned the corner, their blue lights cutting through the twilight like strobe lights in a nightmare. But they were just the escort. Behind them rolled a black government-issue Suburban identical to the one I was sitting in, but with federal plates. The music in the backyard stopped. The chatter died instantly. Every head turned toward the driveway as the convoy screeched to a halt in front of my mother's house. Hunter dropped the tongs. They clattered onto the patio stones. He took a step forward, his face shifting from arrogance to confusion. "What is going on?" he muttered loud enough for the silence to carry it. "Who called the cops?" The car doors opened in unison. Two uniformed officers stepped out of the cruisers, hands resting near their holsters. But the real terror stepped out of the SUV. It was two special agents from the FBI wearing windbreakers with the yellow bold letters on the back. They did not walk up the driveway. They marched. It was a tactical formation, swift and aggressive. They bypassed the front door and headed straight for the gate leading to the backyard. Hunter tried to intercept them. He puffed out his chest, trying to summon the authority he thought he possessed. "Hey, you can't just walk in here. This is private property. I know the district attorney." The lead FBI agent didn't even slow down. He brushed past Hunter like he was a piece of lawn furniture. "Hunter Vance," the agent barked. "Yeah, that is me," Hunter stammered. "And I demand to know." "Step aside, sir," the agent said. The agents pushed through the gate and entered the backyard party. The guests parted like the Red Sea, backing away toward the fences, clutching their paper plates. No one wanted to be near whatever was about to happen. The lead agent scanned the patio, his eyes locked onto Jasmine. She was still sitting in the lawn chair, the wine glass frozen halfway to her mouth. The Celine sunglasses were sliding down her nose. "Jasmine Vance," the agent asked. His voice was loud, authoritative, and completely devoid of warmth. Jasmine blinked. "Yes, who are you?" "I am Special Agent Miller with the Federal Bureau of Investigation," he announced. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. "I have a federal warrant for your arrest." The glass slipped from Jasmine's fingers. It shattered on the patio stones, splashing cheap Chardonnay onto her sandals. "Arrest," Jasmine squeaked. "For what? I didn't do anything." "You are being charged with violation of Title 18, United States Code Section 1594, willful destruction of a United States passport," Agent Miller recited, "as well as conspiracy to impede interstate commerce and destruction of federal property." He stepped forward. "Stand up, ma'am. Put your hands behind your back," my mother screamed. It was a high-pitched, piercing wail that shattered the stunned silence. "No, you cannot arrest her. She is a mother. This is a mistake. My daughter is a good girl." Lorene threw herself between the agent and Jasmine. It was a pathetic display. The local police officer stepped in gently, but firmly, pulling my mother aside. "Ma'am, do not interfere with a federal agent," the officer warned. "Back away!" Jasmine stood up, her legs shaking so hard the lawn chair rattled. "Mom, Hunter, do something! Tell them!" Hunter rushed forward again, his face red. "Now listen here," Hunter shouted, pointing a finger at Agent Miller. "You have the wrong person. My wife didn't destroy any passport. This is my sister-in-law doing this." "She is crazy. She is lying." Agent Miller turned to look at Hunter. He looked at him with the kind of pity one reserves for a particularly stupid child. "We have video evidence," Mr. Vance Miller said calmly. "And we also have video evidence of a break-in that occurred at 4004 Peachtree Road last night." Miller signaled to the local police officers. "Are you Hunter Vance?" the officer asked. "Yes," Hunter yelled. "You are also under arrest," the officer said, pulling out his handcuffs, "for criminal trespassing, burglary, and conspiracy to commit theft. Turn around." The color drained from Hunter's face so fast he looked like a ghost. "But But I work for Sterling Global. I am a manager. You can't arrest me in front of my neighbors. The officer grabbed Hunter's wrist and spun him around. He slammed Hunter face first against the siding of the house right next to the grill where the burgers were now burning, sending black smoke into the air. "Stop resisting!" the officer shouted. Jasmine began to wail. It was an ugly guttural sound. The agent grabbed her wrists and pulled them behind her back. The metallic click of the handcuffs echoed across the yard louder than the crickets, louder than the sizzling meat. "My sunglasses!" Jasmine sobbed. My glasses fell off. Agent Miller looked down at the vintage Celine frames lying on the grass. He picked them up. He examined them. "These are evidence, ma'am," Miller said, bagging them. "Stolen property recovered from the suspect." They marched them out. It was a parade of humiliation. Jasmine weeping, mascara down her cheeks, stumbling in her wedges. Hunter, head bowed, his polo shirt pulled up in the back, exposing his pale skin. My mother trailing behind them, sobbing and begging the neighbors to tell the police what a good family they were. But the neighbors said nothing. Davis, the man Hunter had been bragging to, took a sip of his beer and watched with wide eyes. The church ladies whispered behind their hands. The facade was not just cracked, it was demolished. I watched from the car as they were shoved into the back of the vehicles. Jasmine was put in the federal SUV. Hunter was put in the police cruiser. They were separated just as their lies were about to be separated from reality. My mother stood in the middle of the driveway alone. The blue lights reflected off her tear-streaked face. She looked small. She looked old. She looked around for someone to blame, someone to yell at, but there was no one there. The convoy began to move. "Driver," I said softly, "follow them." We pulled out slowly, trailing the sirens. I watched the back of the federal SUV ahead of me. I imagined Jasmine inside, sitting on the hard plastic seat, her hands cuffed behind her back. I wondered if she was thinking about the toilet flush. I wondered if she realized that the water had not just taken my passport, it had risen up to drown her. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus, my lawyer. "It is done." The text read, "Bail hearing is set for tomorrow morning. I have already contacted the prosecutor to oppose release based on flight risk and lack of remorse. They are going to spend the night in the cage." I put the phone down. The burning smell of the ruined BBQ faded as we drove away, replaced by the cool air conditioning of the car. I did not feel happy. Happiness is too light a word. I felt heavy, solid satisfaction. It was the feeling of a debt being paid. It was the feeling of gravity finally working the way it was supposed to. They had wanted a show. They had wanted to be the center of attention. Well, I had given them exactly what they wanted. They were the stars of the show now. And the grand finale was just beginning. The scene in the backyard had devolved into absolute chaos, the kind of spectacle that would be whispered about in our neighborhood for decades. Hunter was pinned against the vinyl siding of my mother's house, his face pressed into the plastic so hard his cheek was distorted. The local police officer, a man who clearly had no patience for suburban entitlements, held Hunter's arm at an angle that looked incredibly uncomfortable. "Do you know who my father is?" Hunter screamed, spit flying from his mouth. "My father is a partner at Vance and Associates. He plays golf with the mayor. You are making the biggest mistake of your life. You are going to be a crossing guard by tomorrow morning." The officer did not blink. He simply leaned in closer, applying just enough pressure to make Hunter wince. "Sir, I do not care if your father is the Pope," the officer said calmly. "You are under arrest for burglary and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use it because everything you are screaming is being recorded on my body camera." Hunter continued to struggle, kicking his legs like a toddler having a tantrum. It was pathetic. This was the man who had spent years lecturing me about professionalism in class. This was the man who had called me a glorified secretary. Now he was nothing more than a common criminal resisting arrest in front of an audience of people he had tried so hard to impress. Jasmine was faring no better. The federal agents were not as gentle as the local police. They moved with a mechanical efficiency that was terrifying to watch. They had walked her to the middle of the driveway right past the neighbors she had just been laughing with. "Ayana set me up." Jasmine wailed, tears streaming down her face and ruining her expensive foundation. "This is a prank. It has to be a prank. Tell them, Mom. Tell them Ayana is crazy." She put the passport in the toilet. "She did it to frame me." She looked around wildly, locking eyes with Mrs. Gable, the head of the church choir. "Mrs. Gable, please tell them I am a good mother. I would never do this." Mrs. Gable took a slow sip of her iced tea and looked away. The silence from the neighbors was deafening. They had seen the arrogance. They had heard the bragging. And deep down, they knew exactly who Jasmine was. They were just waiting for the curtain to fall. Then came the performance I had been expecting. My mother, seeing that screaming was not working, and that her precious son-in-law was in handcuffs, decided to play her final card. She gasped loudly, bringing a hand to her chest. "Oh, my heart," Lorene cried out. "I cannot breathe. They are killing me." She wobbled for a second, making sure everyone was watching, and then slumped to the ground in a faint that was so theatrical it belonged on a daytime soap opera. She landed carefully on the grass, making sure not to hit the concrete driveway. Mom Jasmine screamed, struggling against the agent's grip. "You killed her! Ayana, look what you did! You killed Mom!" The lead FBI agent did not look impressed. He tapped his radio. "Dispatch, send an ambulance to this location for a female claiming cardiac distress. Conscious and breathing. Likely panic attack." He looked down at my mother, whose eyelids were fluttering. "Ma'am, the paramedics are on their way. If you are faking this to obstruct a federal arrest, I will add a charge to your file." My mother's eyes snapped open instantly. She sat up, miraculously cured, glaring at the agent. "I am not faking," she hissed. "I am a mother watching her family be destroyed." The agent ignored her. He pushed Jasmine toward the back of the black SUV. "Watch your head," he said, guiding her into the back seat. As the heavy door slammed shut, cutting off Jasmine's sobbing, I felt a vibration of pure satisfaction hum through the frame of my car. They were separated. Hunter was in the back of a police cruiser, red-faced and still shouting about his father. Jasmine was in federal custody. My mother was sitting on the grass, defeated, as the party guests quietly shuffled out the side gate, eager to escape the blast zone. I tapped the partition glass. "Driver, take me to the precinct. I want to be there when they book them." The drive to the station was short. I spent it reapplying my lipstick in the vanity mirror. I chose a deep blood-red shade. It was a power color. I smoothed my blazer. I checked my reflection. I looked expensive. I looked untouchable. I looked like the person who signed the checks, not the person who begged for them. When I walked into the precinct, the atmosphere was a mix of stale coffee floor wax and misery. It was a place where people came on the worst days of their lives. But for me, this was a victory lap. I walked up to the front desk. My lawyer, Marcus, was already there, leaning against the counter and chatting with the sergeant. He straightened up when he saw me. "They are in processing," Marcus said. "Hunter is currently demanding to speak to the governor. The officers are finding it quite amusing. Jasmine is in a holding cell with a woman arrested for assault. She is terrified." "Good," I said. "Can I see them?" Marcus nodded. "The sergeant says you can have 5 minutes in the interview room before they are transferred to the county lockup for the night. They are claiming it is a misunderstanding and that you will drop the charges once you see them." I smiled. It was a smile that did not reach my eyes. "Let us go clear up that misunderstanding." We walked down a long hallway lined with cinder block walls. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The officer opened a heavy steel door and ushered me into a room with a metal table and a two-way mirror. On the other side of the table, handcuffed to a metal bar, sat Hunter and Jasmine. They looked wrecked. Hunter's polo shirt was torn at the collar. Jasmine's hair was a bird's nest, her eyes swollen shut from crying. When I walked in, their heads snapped up. For a second, I saw hope in their eyes. They thought I was there to save them. They thought I was there to write the check, apologize to the officers, and make the bad dream go away. Ayana Jasmine gasped. Thank God. Tell them. Tell them this is insane. Get me out of here. That woman in the cell looked at me like she wanted to kill me. Hunter sat up straight, trying to regain some dignity. Okay, Ayana, you made your point. It was a funny joke. You scared us. Now tell your lawyer to drop this so we can go home. I have work tomorrow. I cannot have an arrest record. I pulled out the metal chair opposite them and sat down slowly. I placed my Hermes bag on the table. The sound of the leather hitting the metal was the only noise in the room. I looked at them for a long moment. I let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. You think this is a joke? I asked softly. Of course it is, Hunter snapped. You flushed your own passport, or maybe you just hid it. You cannot prove anything. And breaking into your room. We were looking for emergency contact info because we were worried about you. That is not burglary. That is family concern. I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Hunter, I said. We have video of you screaming about finding my cash stash. We have video of Jasmine saying now you have to stay while flushing my federal identification. There is no version of this story where you are the victim. Jasmine's face crumpled. But Ayana, we are sisters. You cannot send your sister to prison. Think about Jackson. Who will take care of Jackson? I leaned forward. You should have thought about Jackson before you committed a felony in front of him. You should have thought about Jackson before you tried to trap his aunt and destroy her career. Mom is outside, Jasmine pleaded. She is a wreck. She says she is going to mortgage the house to get us out. You are destroying Mom. Mom is an accomplice, I said coldly. She held the flashlight while you broke my lock. She is lucky I did not have her arrested too. Hunter slammed his hand on the table, rattling the handcuffs. Listen to me, you ungrateful brat, Hunter shouted. I am going to sue you. I am going to sue you for defamation, for false imprisonment, for emotional distress. My father will bury you in legal fees. You will be penniless by the time I am done with you. I looked at Hunter. I looked at the sweat on his forehead. I looked at the fear behind his bluster. Hunter, I said calmly. Your father is an estate planning attorney who handles wills for retirees in Florida. He is not a litigator, and he certainly does not have the resources to fight a federal case. Hunter's mouth opened and closed like a fish. How did she know that? He had always lied about his father being a high-powered corporate lawyer. And as for suing me, I continued, you might want to save your money. You are going to need it, because I am not dropping the charges. The room went deadly silent. What Jasmine whispered. I am not signing the non-prosecution form, I said. I am letting the state and federal government proceed. In fact, my lawyer has already handed over the additional evidence regarding the value of the vase you broke and the cost of the trip you ruined. I am also filing a civil suit for $50,000 in damages. You cannot do that, Hunter whispered. We do not have $50,000. I know, I said. That is why the bank will likely foreclose on Mom's house to pay the judgment. Jasmine let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. She lunged forward as far as the cuffs would allow. I hate you, she screamed. I hate you. You are evil. You are doing this on purpose. Yes, I said. I am. I stood up. I picked up my bag. I spent 30 years trying to be good enough for you people, I said, looking down at them. I spent 30 years apologizing for my success, hiding my money, and cleaning up your messes. I let you treat me like a servant in my own life. I walked to the door and placed my hand on the handle. But the servant is gone, I said. The assistant is gone. The little sister you could bully is gone. I opened the door. The noise of the precinct flooded in. Enjoy your night, I said. I hear the federal holding facility has terrible mattresses. I walked out. Behind me I heard Hunter screaming my name. I heard Jasmine sobbing. But for the first time in my life, their voices did not make me feel guilty. They sounded like background noise. They sounded like the past. Marcus met me in the hallway. You did good, Marcus said. The prosecutor is ready. Bail hearing is at 9 a.m. Do you want to be there? No, I said. I have a meeting with a real estate agent. I want to buy a new vase. I walked out of the police station and into the night air. It was crisp and cool. I took a deep breath. I felt lighter. I felt cleaner. The toxicity that had clogged my veins for decades was finally being flushed out, just like that passport. My mother was sitting on a bench outside the station, holding a tissue to her nose. When she saw me, she stood up. Her eyes were red. Ayana, she croaked. Please, they are your family. I stopped. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. The woman who had watched me get bullied for years and told me to be quiet. No, Mom, I said. They are inmates. You might want to call a cab. It is going to be a long night. I signaled for my driver. I got into the car and drove away, leaving my mother standing alone on the sidewalk. I did not look back. There was nothing back there for me anymore. Only a future that I was going to build on my own terms brick by brick, starting with the rubble of their lives. The Fulton County Courthouse is a place where hope goes to die, usually suffocated by the smell of stale floor wax and anxiety. The fluorescent lights hum with a low headache-inducing buzz that seems designed to break your spirit before you even stand in front of a judge. I sat in the second row of the gallery, my legs crossed, wearing a black Givenchy blazer that cost more than the bail bondsman's entire car. I was the only person in the room who looked like they wanted to be there. For everyone else, this was the worst day of their life. For me, it was Tuesday morning entertainment. My lawyer Marcus sat beside me scrolling through emails on his phone. He leaned over and whispered, Judge Holloway is presiding today. He is a tough old bird. He hates entitled defendants. This is going to be good. I nodded. I knew Judge Holloway, or rather, I knew of him. He was a member of the same country club as my boss Charles Sterling. They played golf on Sundays. I wondered if Hunter, in his infinite stupidity, would try to name drop. The bailiff called out the docket number. The side door opened and my family shuffled in. Seeing them in orange jumpsuits was a visual shock that I will cherish forever. Hunter, usually so obsessed with his appearance, looked small and pale. The jumpsuit bunched around his waist and his hair was a greasy mess. Jasmine looked even worse. Her mascara had been scrubbed off, leaving her face looking raw and puffy. She was trembling. When she looked out into the gallery and saw me, her eyes widened. She started to mouth something, probably a plea for help, but the bailiff nudged her forward. They stood before the bench. My mother Lorene was sitting in the front row, clutching a rosary bead so tight her knuckles were white. She let out a small, strangled sob when she saw them. Mr. Vance and Mrs. Vance, Judge Holloway said, peering over his reading glasses. You are charged with a laundry list of offenses: burglary, criminal trespass, conspiracy to commit theft, and Mrs. Vance, a federal charge regarding the destruction of a passport. Hunter cleared his throat. He stood up straighter, trying to summon the arrogance that had gotten him into this mess. Your Honor, Hunter boomed, his voice echoing in the quiet room. There has been a mistake. We are upstanding citizens. I am a senior executive at Sterling Global. I demand to be released on my own recognizance immediately so I can return to work. My boss, Charles Sterling, will be hearing about this. I felt Marcus stiffen beside me to suppress a laugh. I just smiled. Hunter had walked right into the trap. Judge Holloway slowly took off his glasses. He looked at Hunter with an expression of pure disbelief. You are a senior executive at Sterling Global, the judge asked. Yes, Your Honor, Hunter lied smoothly. Mr. Sterling and I are close personal friends. Judge Holloway leaned back in his leather chair. He picked up a pen and tapped it against the bench. That is fascinating, Mr. Vance, because I had dinner with Charles Sterling last night, and he mentioned that his company had just been acquired by Horizon Capital. He also mentioned that he was cleaning house. Hunter's face went gray. The judge continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. And frankly, Mr. Vance, looking at your file here, I see an email from this morning from the HR department of Sterling Global confirming your termination effective immediately. So, not only are you unemployed, but you are also lying to an officer of the court. The gallery remained silent, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. Hunter looked like he was about to vomit. He looked around wildly and his eyes landed on me. I gave him a small, polite wave. Jasmine decided this was the moment to intervene. She burst into tears. "It is her fault," Jasmine screamed, pointing a shackled hand at me. "My sister. She set us up. She is rich. She can pay for all of this. She is doing this to torture us." Judge Holloway slammed his gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. "Silence," the judge roared. "Mrs. Vance, another outburst like that, and I will hold you in contempt." He looked at the two of them with disdain. "I see a pattern here," the judge said. "Entitlement, lack of remorse, attempting to manipulate the court. And Mrs. Vance, you destroyed a passport to prevent a citizen from traveling. That suggests a desire to control and restrict movement. That makes you a flight risk, ironically." He looked down at his papers. "The prosecution has requested bail be denied. However, since these are technically property crimes, I am required to set a bond. But given your attitude, your lack of employment, and the federal nature of the passport charge, I am going to make sure you take this seriously." He looked straight at Hunter. "Bail is set at $50,000 for Mr. Vance." My mother gasped audibly. "And $50,000 for Mrs. Vance," the judge continued. "Cash or surety bond. Next case." The gavel banged again. "No," Hunter screamed as the bailiff grabbed his arm. "50,000. I do not have. 50,000. Jasmine was sobbing so hard she could barely walk. They were dragged back through the side door, their orange jumpsuits disappearing into the darkness of the holding cells. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. The show was over. It was time for the after party. My mother was waiting for me in the hallway. She looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking. When she saw me, she lunged forward, grabbing my arm with a desperate grip. "Ayana," she cried, "you have to help them." "Did you hear the judge? $100,000 total? We need 10% to get a bondsman. That is $10,000 cash, plus the collateral." She looked at me with pleading eyes. "You have the money, Ayana. I know you do. You fly first class. You live in that penthouse. Please, just write the check. They cannot stay in jail. Hunter will get beaten up. Jasmine is terrified. Be the bigger person." I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. I gently but firmly peeled her fingers off my blazer. "Mom," I said, my voice calm and reasonable. "I would love to help. Really. But I am broke." My mother blinked. "What? What do you mean broke?" I sighed, putting on my best performance. "Mom, the trip to Monaco cost $40,500. It was non-refundable. When Jasmine flushed my passport, that money was gone. Poof! Down the drain." I opened my hands in a helpless gesture. "That was my savings, Mom. I spent everything on that trip because it was an investment for my career. Now, thanks to Jasmine, I have lost the money and I might lose my job because I missed the meeting." This was a lie, of course. I had closed the deal, I had made millions, and the trip was a business expense. But my mother did not need to know that. "But," my mother stammered, "you must have something, credit cards, a savings account." I shook my head. "Hunter said I am just an assistant, right? Assistants do not have $10,000 lying around. I am tapped out." I leaned in closer. If Jasmine had not destroyed my trip, I would have had the money. But she did. So really, she did this to herself. My mother stared at me. For a second, I saw a flash of hatred in her eyes. She knew I was lying. She knew I had the money. But she also knew she could not prove it. "So you are just going to let them rot," she hissed. "Your own flesh and blood." I checked my watch. "I have a lunch reservation, Mom. I really have to go. Good luck with the bail." I turned to walk away, but I stopped and looked back. "Oh, and Mom, if you are thinking about calling a bondsman, they usually require property as collateral. Do you still have equity in the house?" My mother's face went pale. The house. The house she had lived in for 30 years. The house my father had left her. It was the only thing she owned. "Do not you dare," she whispered. I shrugged. "It is up to you. You say family comes first, right? Prove it." I walked away, the click of my heels echoing on the marble floor. I did not leave the building immediately. I went to the second-floor balcony that overlooked the main atrium. I watched from above as my mother pulled out her cell phone. I saw her hands shaking as she dialed. I saw her pacing back and forth. I could not hear the words, but I knew the conversation. She was calling a predatory lender. She was calling a high-risk bail bondsman. She was putting her home on the line to save two people who would never be able to pay her back. I watched her pull a notebook out of her purse and write down numbers. She was doing it. She was signing her death warrant. Hunter was unemployed. He would never be able to pay the premiums. Jasmine was facing federal prison. She would not be working anytime soon. The mortgage payments would fall behind. The interest rates on a second mortgage for bail money were astronomical. In 6 months, maybe less, that house would be in foreclosure. And that was exactly what I wanted. I took out my phone and sent a text to my real estate broker. "Keep an eye on 124 Oak Street. It is going to hit the market as a distressed property soon. I want to buy it under an LLC, cash offer." I put the phone away. My mother hung up the call downstairs. She looked defeated. She looked broken. She headed toward the exit to go save her golden children, unaware that she had just sold her sanctuary to the scapegoat. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunshine. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like victory. I had not just put them in jail. I had maneuvered them into destroying their own financial foundation. Jasmine flushed my passport. I was about to foreclose on her childhood. I got into my car. The driver looked in the rearview mirror. "Where to?" "Ms. Jenkins." "Take me to the office," I said. "I have a merger to finalize. And then take me to the bank. I need to move some funds into my acquisition account." As the car pulled away, I thought about the $50,000 bail. It was a lot of money to them. To me, it was just the cost of admission to the greatest show on earth, the downfall of the House of Vance. And the best part, they were doing all the work for me. All I had to do was stand back and watch them burn. The morning sun did not look hopeful through the windows of the Sterling Global Atlanta branch. It looked harsh and judgmental. I was not there physically, of course. I was sitting in my corner office at Horizon Capital, 40 floors up, sipping a green tea that cost more than Hunter's hourly wage. But thanks to modern technology and the high-definition camera system in the Sterling conference room, I had a front-row seat to the execution. Hunter had managed to post bail. My mother had done exactly what I predicted and called the predatory lender, putting her house on the line to secure the $50,000 needed to get him and Jasmine out of the county lockup. A smarter man would have gone home, taken a shower, and called a lawyer. A smarter man would have realized that his life was radioactive. But Hunter Vance was not a smart man. He was a desperate, arrogant man who believed his own lies. According to the security logs I was monitoring, Hunter swiped his badge at the employee entrance at 8:45 in the morning. He was wearing the same suit he had been arrested in. It was wrinkled, stained with sweat, and I imagined it smelled faintly of the holding cell floor. He walked past the reception desk with his head held high, ignoring the whispers of the secretaries who had undoubtedly seen his mugshot on the local news blog that morning. He marched straight to the payroll department. I could see the internal ticket he had filed. Request for emergency salary advance, $5,000. He needed money to pay the bondsman's premium before my mother's check bounced. He was standing at the desk of a terrified payroll clerk named Sarah, leaning over her, trying to use his physical size to intimidate her. "Just cut the check, Sarah," I heard him say through the security feed. "Mr. Sterling authorized it personally. Call him if you do not believe me. Actually, do not call him. He is busy. Just do your job." Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear. "Mr. Vance, the system is locking me out. It says your status is under review. I cannot process any payments." Hunter slammed his hand on the desk. Under review. That is a glitch. I am the regional logistics manager. Override it. That was the moment the phone at Sarah's desk rang. She picked it up, listened for a second, and then looked at Hunter with wide, fearful eyes. Mr. Vance, she squeaked. That was the executive secretary. You are wanted in conference room A immediately, for a video call with headquarters. Hunter froze. Then a slow, delusional smile spread across his face. He straightened his tie, trying to smooth out the creases. See, Hunter said to Sarah. That is Mr. Sterling. He probably wants to apologize for this mix-up and discuss my promotion. When I come out of that meeting, you better have that check ready. He turned and walked toward the conference room. He walked with a swagger that was painful to watch. He actually believed he was going to talk his way out of a felony and a firing. He believed his charm was a currency that had not yet been devalued. He opened the heavy glass doors of conference room A. It was a large room dominated by a massive mahogany table and an 80-inch screen on the far wall. The room was empty. Hunter walked in and sat at the head of the table. He put his feet up on an empty chair. He checked his reflection in his phone screen and tried to wipe a smudge of dirt off his cheek. The screen flickered to life. The feed connected. On the left side of the split screen was Charles Sterling, the CEO, sitting in his office in Monaco. On the right side was me, Ayanna Jenkins, sitting in my office in Atlanta, looking impeccable in a white silk blouse. Hunter's feet dropped off the chair. He sat up. He squinted at the screen. Mr. Sterling, Hunter boomed, putting on his fake corporate voice. So good to see you, sir. I apologize for the attire. I had a bit of a rough night. Family emergency. But I am here ready to work. He paused. He looked at the other side of the screen. He looked at me. And Ayanna, Hunter asked, his voice dropping. What are you doing on this call? Is this a joke? Mr. Sterling? Why is my sister-in-law on a company line? Charles Sterling did not smile. He did not say hello. He simply leaned forward, his face filling the frame. Mr. Vance, Charles said, his voice ice cold. This is not a social call, and Ms. Jenkins is not here as your sister-in-law. She is here as the senior partner of Horizon Capital, the firm that acquired Sterling Global yesterday. Hunter blinked. He laughed nervously. Acquired. What gnome? Ayanna is an assistant. She answers phones. I unmuted my microphone. The sound of my voice filled the room where Hunter sat. Hunter, I said smoothly, I suggest you stop talking. Every word you say is being recorded by HR legal counsel. Hunter looked at the camera lens, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead again. Ayanna, stop playing games. You hacked the system. Is that it? You are going to get in so much trouble. Mr. Sterling, tell her to get off the line. Mr. Vance, Charles interrupted. Shut up. The command was so sharp it made Hunter jump. You are here because at 9 a.m. this morning we received a notification from the Fulton County Sheriff's Office regarding your arrest for burglary, criminal trespass, and conspiracy, Charles said. We also received a report regarding your wife's arrest for federal passport fraud. Hunter waved his hands frantically. Sir, that is all a misunderstanding, a domestic dispute. My neighbors are crazy. It has nothing to do with my work. It has everything to do with your work, I interjected. Because in the process of reviewing your file for the merger, I conducted an audit of your expenses. I picked up a file on my desk and held it up to the camera. Disney World, Hunter, I asked. $3,000 charged to the company card for a team-building retreat where the only attendees were you. Jasmine and Jackson. Hunter turned pale. That was approved by... And the strip club in downtown Atlanta. I continued flipping the page. $2,000 categorized as client entertainment. We called the client listed. He has been dead for 3 years. Hunter began to stammer. I can explain. It was an accounting error. I can pay it back. Just give me the advance on my salary. There is no salary, Charles said, and there is no advance. Hunter stood up. You cannot fire me. I know too much. I run this branch. If I go, the whole logistics chain falls apart. I laughed. It was the same laugh I had used in the police station. Hunter, I said, you are a mid-level manager who spends half his day looking at golf clubs on eBay. We have already replaced you. Your subordinate Sarah has been promoted to interim lead. She knows more about the logistics chain than you ever did, replaced Hunter whispered. You are being terminated for cause effective immediately, I announced. Gross misconduct, embezzlement of company funds, and bringing disrepute to the company brand through criminal activity. I leaned closer to the camera. That means no severance package, no unemployment benefits as we will contest them based on the theft, and your stock options cancelled due to the violation of your morality clause. Hunter looked like he had been punched in the stomach. He slumped back into the chair. But I have a mortgage, he whispered. I have legal fees. Ayanna, please. You cannot do this. We are family. Jasmine is your sister. If I lose this job, we lose everything. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had mocked my career for years. The man who had stood by the grill and told his neighbors I was a failure. You should have thought about that before you stood in my kitchen and laughed while my passport went down the drain, I said. I paused for effect. You wanted to stop me from traveling, Hunter. You wanted to keep me in my place. Well, congratulations. You have my full attention now. Hunter wiped his face. Please. Just give me 2 weeks' notice. Just let me resign. Do not put this on my record. I shook my head. Do you remember what you said to me when I walked out the door, I asked? You said I was nothing. You said I was just a secretary. I took a sip of my tea. Well, this secretary just signed your termination letter. Hunter looked at the screen, his eyes pleading. Mr. Sterling. Sir, we are friends, Mr. Vance Charles said with disgust. I have never met you before today, and I hope to never meet you again. Security is waiting outside the door. You have 5 minutes to clear your desk. If you take anything other than personal items, we will add theft charges to your current indictment. Charles's screen went black. He had disconnected. It was just me and Hunter now. Ayanna. Hunter wept. He was actually crying now. Please. Mom will lose the house. I looked at him with zero sympathy. You flushed your future down the toilet with that passport, Hunter, I said. You watched the water spin and you smiled. Now you are drowning. Do not ask me for a life vest. I reached out and pressed the button. Connection terminated. I sat in my office for a moment staring at the blank screen. I felt a deep, vibrating sense of power. It wasn't the petty power of bullying that Hunter used. It was the absolute power of competence and consequence. I checked the security feed one last time. 2 large security guards had entered the conference room. They pulled Hunter out of the chair by his arms. He was limp defeated. They marched him out into the main bullpen. Every employee in the office was watching. Sarah, the payroll clerk he had tried to bully, stood up and watched him pass. Hunter looked at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. He was carrying nothing. No box of photos, no plants. He was leaving with exactly what he deserved. Nothing. They escorted him to the elevator. The doors closed on his weeping face. I picked up my phone and called my real estate agent. Hunter just lost his income, I said. The foreclosure on my mother's house is going to happen faster than we thought. Be ready to move on the title. I hung up. I turned my chair to look out the window at the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere down there, Hunter was standing on the sidewalk, unemployed, facing a felony, and terrified of going home to tell his wife that their house of cards had finally collapsed. I went back to work. I had a merger to finish. And unlike Hunter, I had a future to build. The glow of victory after firing Hunter was still warm on my skin, but in the world of high-stakes revenge, warmth is often a warning sign that you are about to get burned. I was sitting in my office at Horizon Capital, reviewing the acquisition files when my private line rang. It was Marcus. He did not sound like the lawyer who had just successfully arraigned my sister and brother-in-law. He sounded like a man who had just found a body buried in the backyard. Ayanna, are you sitting down? Marcus asked. His voice was devoid of the usual legal bravado. I swiveled my chair to face the window. I am Marcus. What is it? Did Hunter try to flee the state? Did Jasmine fail her drug test? No, Marcus said. This is worse. This is about your mother. I felt a twinge of irritation. My mother was a nuisance, a guilt-tripping enabler, but she was not a criminal mastermind. She was just a sad woman about to lose her house. What did she do now, Marcus? I asked. Did she try to mortgage the furniture? I need you to look at the secure file I just sent you, Marcus said. We ran a deep dive forensic audit on your family's financials to prepare for the civil suit. We wanted to see if they had any hidden assets we could seize. We checked everything attached to their social security numbers and by extension, yours, since you share a last name and previous addresses. I opened the file on my tablet. It was a dense spreadsheet of credit reports, loan histories, and bank statements. Go to page 14, Marcus instructed. Look at the entry dated August 12, 2014. I scrolled down. My finger hovered over the date. 2014. 10 years ago. I was 22 years old then. I had just graduated from Spelman College and was working 80 hours a week as a junior analyst. I saw the entry. My heart stopped beating for a full second. Student loan. Navient. Principal amount $45,000. Borrower Ayanna Jenkins. Co-signer Laureen Jenkins. Beneficiary Institution University of Georgia. I stared at the screen. The numbers blurred. Marcus, I whispered. This is a mistake. I went to Spelman on a full academic scholarship. I never took out student loans. I worked 2 jobs to pay for my books and housing. I have 0 debt. I know, Marcus said softly. But according to this, you took out a private loan 10 years ago to pay for tuition and housing at the University of Georgia. I felt the blood drain from my face. I did not go to the University of Georgia. Jasmine did. Jasmine went to UGA for 2 years before flunking out to marry Hunter. She spent those 2 years partying, rushing a sorority, and buying clothes she could not afford. Marcus, I said, my voice trembling with a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. Are you telling me that my mother used my identity to take out a loan for Jasmine? It looks that way, Marcus said. We pulled the original promissory note. The signature is yours, Ayanna. Or at least it looks like yours. But the disbursement account did not belong to you. It belonged to Jasmine. I closed my eyes. I remembered that summer 10 years ago. I was living at home for a few months before finding my own place. I remembered my mother asking to borrow my driver's license and social security card for some insurance paperwork. She said she needed to update the family policy. I trusted her. She was my mother. She had stolen my identity. She had stolen my good credit, which I had worked so hard to build, and used it to fund Jasmine's party years. Has she been paying it? I asked. She was, Marcus said. Minimum interest only payments for 10 years. That is why you never noticed it. It was in good standing, so no debt collectors ever called you. She kept it hidden. But she stopped paying 2 months ago, probably when the family finances got tight. It is about to go into default, Ayanna. And when it does, they are going to come after you for $80,000 with interest. I dropped the tablet on my desk. It clattered loudly in the silent office. This was not just money, this was cannibalism. My mother had looked at her 2 daughters and made a choice. She saw one who was responsible, hardworking, and successful. And she saw one who was lazy, entitled, and reckless. And instead of telling the lazy one to get a job, she carved a piece out of the successful one to feed her. She harvested me. I was not a daughter to her. I was a resource. I was a credit score to be exploited so Jasmine could have a soft landing. Ayanna, Marcus said, breaking the silence. This is identity theft. This is wire fraud. This is a felony that carries a mandatory prison sentence. But it is your mother. I need to know how you want to handle this. We can try to settle it civilly. We can force her to refinance. No, I said. The word hung in the air. "I beg your pardon," Marcus asked. "No settlements," I said. "No refinancing." I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the city. I thought about the mother who sat in the courtroom yesterday crying about family. I thought about the woman who told me I was selfish for not babysitting. All this time, she knew. She looked me in the face for 10 years, ate my food, took my Christmas presents, and knew she had committed a felony against me. She sacrificed me for Jasmine, again, and again, and again. "File the charges, Marcus," I said. Ayana Marcus warned. "If we do this, there is no coming back. You are putting your mother in prison. She is 60 years old. She put me in debt when I was 22, I snapped. She jeopardized my career. She stole from me. If a stranger did this, would you hesitate?" "No," Marcus admitted. "She is a stranger," I said. "I do not know this woman. The mother I thought I had does not exist. This woman is a thief who shares my last name." I took a deep breath. "Draft the affidavit of forgery," I ordered. "Contact the fraud department at the lender. And Marcus, call Agent Miller at the FBI. Tell him we have an addendum to the current investigation. Tell him the conspiracy goes deeper than the passport. Tell him the mother is the ringleader." There was a long pause on the line. Then I heard the sound of Marcus typing. "Understood," Marcus said. "I will have the papers ready for you to sign within the hour." I hung up the phone. I did not cry. I wanted to, but the tears wouldn't come. I felt hollowed out. The last thread of guilt I had about the foreclosure, about Hunter's firing, about Jasmine's arrest, it all evaporated. I had been feeling guilty about destroying a family that had already destroyed me a decade ago. I grabbed my purse. I needed to sign those papers, and then I needed to witness the end. An hour later, I was sitting in Marcus's office signing my name to a sworn statement that accused Lorene Jenkins of first-degree forgery and identity theft. The pen scratched against the paper, a sound that felt like a knife cutting a cord. Once the papers were filed, the machinery of the law moved with terrifying speed. Because Agent Miller was already investigating the family for the passport fraud, this new evidence painted a picture of a criminal enterprise operating under the guise of a suburban family. I did not go to my mother's house. I could not bear to look at her. But Marcus had a private investigator parked down the street, live streaming the feed to my phone. It was late afternoon. My mother was home alone. Hunter and Jasmine were still in jail, unable to make bail, because my mother was still trying to secure the loan on the house. She did not know that the loan she was trying to get would have been denied anyway because of the default on the stolen student loan. Her web of lies had become a suffocating net. I watched on my phone as the unmarked sedans pulled up to the curb. These were not the aggressive raid teams that took Jasmine. These were white-collar crime detectives. They wore suits. They looked like accountants with badges. They walked up the driveway. My mother opened the door. She looked exhausted, wearing a bathrobe at 3 in the afternoon. I saw her face fall when she saw the badges. She probably thought they were there about Jasmine. I saw the detective speak to her. I saw him hold up a piece of paper. It was a copy of the student loan note. My mother staggered back. She grabbed the doorframe for support. She knew. In that moment, she knew that the secret she had buried for 10 years had finally clawed its way out of the grave. She started shaking her head. She pointed down the street, probably blaming someone else. But the detective shook his head. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. They did not slam her against the wall. They were gentle. They let her turn around. They clicked the cuffs onto her wrists. I watched my mother, the matriarch, the woman who ruled our family with guilt and manipulation, be led down the front walk in her bathrobe. She looked small. She looked pathetic. She looked up at the sky, and for a fleeting second she looked directly at the camera lens of the investigator across the street. It was as if she felt my gaze. I touched the screen. "Goodbye, Lorene," I whispered. They put her in the back of the sedan. No sirens, no neighbors watching this time. Just a quiet, efficient removal of a cancer that had been eating away at my life. I turned off the phone. I sat in the leather chair in Marcus's office and stared at the wall. "It is done," Marcus said gently. "She is in custody. The bank will be notified of the fraud. The debt will be removed from your name once the investigation is complete. You are free, Ayana." I nodded. I was free. I was debt-free. I was family-free. I stood up and walked to the window. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was the feeling of a heavy coat being taken off after a long winter. "I have no parents now," I said. "You have a future," Marcus reminded me. "And you have your dignity." I turned to him. "What happens to the house now?" I asked. "With your mother arrested for fraud, the bank will accelerate the foreclosure," Marcus explained. "The bail bond she was trying to get will fall through. Hunter and Jasmine will stay in jail until their trial. The house will be empty by the weekend." "Good," I said. "Proceed with the purchase." I walked toward the door. Ayana, Marcus called out. "What are you going to do with the house once you buy it? Are you going to live there?" I stopped. I thought about that house, the four walls that held so many secrets, the room where Jasmine was worshipped, the kitchen where I was told to be smaller, the hallway where my passport was destroyed. "No," I said. "Why? I am not going to live there." I opened the door. "I am going to bulldoze it," I said. I walked out into the hallway. I had one more stop to make. I had a flight to catch, not to Monaco, but to a resort in the Caribbean where nobody knew my name and where the only family I had to worry about was the one I chose for myself. The severance was complete. The umbilical cord was cut. And for the first time in 32 years, I was taking my first breath of real air. Civil court smells different than criminal court. Criminal court smells like fear and stale sweat, a place where people are fighting for their freedom. Civil court smells like paper and money. It is a dry, sterile environment where lives are not taken, but livelihoods are dismantled piece by piece. I sat at the plaintiff's table in the Superior Court of Fulton County, wearing a navy Tom Ford suit that was tailored so sharply it could cut glass. Next to me sat Marcus, my lawyer, who was arranging his files with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a heart transplant. On the other side of the aisle sat the defendants, my family. Hunter and Jasmine were out on bail, having finally secured a bond through a predatory lender who had undoubtedly charged them an exorbitant premium. They looked exhausted. Hunter was wearing a suit that was 2 sizes too big, likely borrowed, and Jasmine was wearing a conservative dress that I recognized from my mother's closet. They huddled together, whispering frantically to their legal counsel. Their lawyer was a man named Mr. Henderson. He was the kind of lawyer you hire when you find his number on a billboard next to a highway exit. He was sweating profusely, his tie was crooked, and his briefcase looked like it was made of vinyl that was peeling at the corners. He was shuffling through a stack of disorganized papers, dropping a few on the floor and scrambling to pick them up. It was a pathetic sight. It was the visual definition of bringing a knife to a nuclear war. Marcus leaned over to me. "Henderson is a personal injury attorney," Marcus whispered, not bothering to lower his voice much. "He specializes in slip and fall cases at grocery stores. He has absolutely no experience in complex civil litigation or high asset damages. This is going to be a bloodbath." I did not smile. I just stared straight ahead at the judge's bench. I was not here to smile. I was here to collect a debt. The bailiff announced the arrival of Judge Patterson. We all stood. Judge Patterson was a no-nonsense woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose and a reputation for hating time wasters. She took her seat and looked over the docket. Jenkins versus Vance and Jenkins, the judge read, a civil suit for damages including breach of contract, intentional infliction of emotional distress, property damage, and interference with economic relations. Plaintiff seeks $500,000 in compensatory and punitive damages. She looked up at the defense table. "Mr. Henderson, are you ready to proceed?" Henderson stood up, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "Yes, Your Honor. Although we would like to move for a dismissal based on the fact that this is a family dispute that has been blown out of proportion." Judge Patterson looked at him over her glasses. Mr. Henderson, there are federal criminal charges pending against your clients regarding the same set of facts. I hardly think blown out of proportion is the correct legal terminology. Motion denied. Opening statements. Marcus stood up. He did not use notes. He walked to the center of the room and addressed the judge directly. Your Honor, this case is not about a family dispute. It is about sabotage. It is about a coordinated effort by the defendants to destroy the livelihood of a successful business executive because of petty jealousy and greed. We will show that the defendants knowingly destroyed federal property, invaded a private residence, and destroyed valuable art, all with the specific intent of causing financial harm to my client. We will show that their actions cost Ms. Jenkins a $40,000 business trip and caused severe emotional distress. And we will ask the court to send a message that being related by blood does not give you the right to bleed someone dry. He sat down. It was short, brutal, and effective. Henderson stood up. He stammered. He rambled about how Jasmine was a stressed mother and how Hunter was a hard-working man who had just lost his job. He tried to paint me as the villain, the rich sister who was bullying her poor family. Judge Patterson looked bored. Call your first witness. Marcus called me to the stand first. I walked up, swore on the Bible, and sat down. I answered Marcus's questions with calm, clear precision. I detailed the cost of the flight. I detailed the cost of the hotel. I explained the value of the kintsugi vase. Then came the cross-examination. Henderson walked up to the podium trying to look intimidating. Ms. Jenkins, he said, you claim this trip cost $40,000. But isn't it true that you are just an executive assistant? How could an assistant afford such a trip? Isn't it true that you are inflating these numbers to punish your sister? I looked at him. I looked at Hunter, who was smirking slightly at the defense table. I am a senior partner at Horizon Capital, I said clearly. My base salary is $750,000 a year, excluding bonuses and equity. The $40,000 came from my personal investment account. I have submitted my tax returns as Exhibit D to prove my income and the source of the funds. Henderson froze. He looked back at his clients. Hunter's smirk vanished. He whispered something to Jasmine, looking panicked. They had never told their lawyer the truth about my job because they refused to believe it themselves. Henderson flipped through his papers, flustered. Well, he stammered. Even so, it is a lot of money for a vacation. It was not a vacation, I corrected him. It was a business trip to close a merger. A merger that your client, Mr. Vance, was employed by. His actions not only cost me money, they jeopardized a $500 million deal. Henderson sat down. He had no more questions. He knew he had just stepped on a landmine. Then Marcus played the videos. The courtroom was equipped with large monitors on the walls. Marcus connected his laptop. Your Honor, Plaintiff's Exhibit A, Marcus announced. The video of the bathroom played. The sound of Jasmine's voice filled the silent courtroom. Now you have to stay. The sound of the toilet flushing was loud and guttural. I watched the judge's face. She winced. It was a visceral reaction. Everyone in the room felt the pettiness, the cruelty of that moment. Then came Exhibit B, the break-in. The sight of my mother and Jasmine with the screwdriver. The sound of the vase shattering. The audio of Hunter screaming on the phone about finding my cash. When the lights came back up, the courtroom felt different. The air was heavier. The defense table looked like a sinking ship. Marcus called Hunter to the stand. Hunter walked up slowly. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. Mr. Vance, Marcus began standing comfortably with one hand in his pocket. You heard the audio recording of your phone call to Miss Jenkins. You demanded to know where the money was. You threatened to burn her life to the ground. Is that correct? I was upset, Hunter mumbled. It was heat of the moment. You were upset because you wanted money. Marcus pressed. You believed your sister-in-law had cash hidden in her home, and you felt entitled to take it. Is that correct? No, Hunter protested. We were... we were looking for... For what? Marcus snapped. For a passport you had already destroyed, or for cash to pay for your lifestyle. Hunter stayed silent. Mr. Vance Marcus continued. You stated in your deposition that you believed Ms. Jenkins was a secretary. You mocked her career. Yet you also admitted to Mr. Sterling that you knew she was the acquiring partner. Which is it? Were you ignorant or were you malicious? I didn't know, Hunter shouted. She lied to us. She pretended to be poor. Marcus smiled. It was a shark's smile. She never pretended to be poor, Mr. Vance. She simply lived modestly. You assumed she was poor because you needed to feel superior to her. And when you found out she was successful, you tried to destroy her. That is malice. Marcus picked up a piece of paper. You are currently unemployed, is that correct? Yes, Hunter spat. Because she got me fired. You got yourself fired, Mr. Vance. Marcus corrected. By committing a felony. Now let's talk about assets. You own a home, correct? Hunter hesitated. The bank owns it. We have a mortgage. And you have $40,000 in credit card debt. Hunter looked down. Yes. And your wife, Jasmine Vance, has no income. No. So Marcus said, looking at the jury box, although there was no jury, just the judge. You have no way to pay for the damages you caused. You destroyed $40,000 of my client's money, plus a $5,000 work of art, and you have zero ability to make restitution. I will get a new job, Hunter insisted. I am a top-tier manager. Marcus let the silence hang there. He let everyone look at the sweaty, desperate man in the cheap suit. No further questions, Marcus said. The closing arguments were brief. Henderson pleaded for mercy, saying that the family had suffered enough with the arrests and the public shame. He argued that bankruptcy would destroy them. Marcus stood up for his closing. Your Honor, he said softly, bankruptcy is a financial state. What the defendants are suffering from is a moral bankruptcy. They have shown no remorse. They have taken no responsibility. They destroyed Ms. Jenkins's property, not by accident, but with a smile. They wanted to trap her. They wanted to control her. They wanted to steal from her. The law cannot fix their character, but it can force them to pay for the destruction they caused. We ask for the full amount of damages. Judge Patterson did not retire to her chambers. She did not need to deliberate. She looked at her notes for a moment, then looked up. The evidence in this case is overwhelming, the judge said. The video evidence clearly demonstrates willful and malicious intent. The testimony regarding Ms. Jenkins' income and the cost of the trip is supported by documentation. The defendant's conduct was egregious and vindictive. She banged her gavel. I find in favor of the plaintiff. I am awarding $45,500 in special damages for the trip and the vase. I am awarding $200,000 in general damages for emotional distress and invasion of privacy. And given the malice displayed in the video evidence, I am awarding $250,000 in punitive damages to deter this type of behavior in the future. Total judgment against the defendants, $495,500. The gavel banged again. Case closed. Hunter's head hit the table. He buried his face in his hands. Jasmine let out a sob that echoed off the high ceilings. Nearly $500,000. They were ruined. They would never pay it off. Their wages would be garnished for the rest of their lives. Any property they owned would be seized. I stood up. I felt no joy. I felt no sadness. I felt only the cold, hard satisfaction of a ledger being balanced. I walked past the defense table. Henderson was packing his bag, trying to avoid eye contact with his clients. Hunter looked up at me. His eyes were red, filled with hate and fear. You happy now, he whispered. You took everything. I stopped. I looked down at him. I didn't take anything, Hunter, I said. I just presented the bill, and you finally paid it. I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was bright and open. Marcus walked beside me. "That went well," Marcus said. "We will file the lien against their property tomorrow morning. If they have any equity left in their house after the mortgage, we will take it. If they have cars, we will take them. We will garnish his unemployment checks if we have to." "Do it," I said. I walked to the elevator. The doors opened. I stepped in. I had stripped them of their pride. I had stripped them of their freedom. And now I had stripped them of their future. The civil suit was not about the money. I did not need their money. It was about ensuring that they could never ever hurt me again because they would be too busy trying to survive the financial winter I had just unleashed upon them. The doors closed. I checked my phone. I had a flight to catch. The Caribbean was calling, and for the first time in my life, I was answering without asking for anyone's permission. The judgment from the civil trial was the first domino. The rest fell with a satisfying rhythmic click that sounded like the ticking of a doomsday clock. 3 months after the trial, I stood in the back of the federal courtroom for Jasmine's sentencing hearing. This time, the atmosphere was not charged with the electric energy of a fight. It was heavy with the damp, suffocating weight of inevitability. Jasmine stood before the judge in a beige jumpsuit that washed out her complexion. She had lost weight. Her hair, once her pride and joy, was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked like a ghost of the sister who used to criticize my outfit choices. The federal prosecutor, a sharp woman named Mrs. Davids, did not mince words. "Your Honor," she said, "the defendant has shown zero remorse throughout this process." In her pre-sentencing interview, she continued to blame the victim, claiming her sister deserved it, and that destroying a passport was not a big deal. This attitude demonstrates a fundamental lack of respect for the law and for the rights of others. We recommend a custodial sentence to reflect the seriousness of interfering with federal identification documents. Jasmine's lawyer, a public defender this time, because they could no longer afford private counsel, tried to argue for probation. He spoke about her being a mother. He spoke about her clean record prior to this. But the judge was not moved. He looked at Jasmine over his spectacles. "Mrs. Vance," he said, "you destroyed a passport to control another person. You treated the law as an inconvenience, and your behavior in this courtroom has been petulant and entitled." He paused. "I sentence you to 18 months in federal prison followed by 2 years of supervised release. You are remanded to custody immediately." Jasmine let out a sound that I can only describe as a squeak. It was the sound of a balloon losing its air. She turned to look at the gallery, searching for Hunter, for Mom, for anyone to save her. But Hunter wasn't there. He was at a bankruptcy hearing across town. And Mom wasn't there. She was meeting with the bank to discuss the surrender of her home. Jasmine was led away in handcuffs. She didn't scream this time. She just wept quietly and pitifully. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright Atlanta sunshine. It was over. The criminal chapter was closed. Now came the financial dismantling. The civil judgment of nearly $500,000 hung over my family like a guillotine. Because they had no cash to pay it, Marcus and I began the process of asset seizure. It is a cold, bureaucratic process. We filed liens against everything they owned. Hunter's car, a leased BMW he was so proud of, was repossessed the next day. I saw the report from the repo man. Hunter had come out screaming, trying to block the tow truck with his body until the driver threatened to call the police. He watched his status symbols serve dragged away, leaving oil stains on the driveway of a house he was about to lose. But the real prize, the centerpiece of their downfall, was my mother's house. The bank had accelerated the foreclosure due to the fraud investigation and the default on the predatory loan she had taken out for bail money. The house was scheduled for a sheriff's sale on the courthouse steps. On the day of the sale, I didn't go myself. I sent my proxy, a representative from the LLC I had formed specifically for this purpose. The LLC was named Phoenix Rising Holdings. A little dramatic, perhaps, but I felt I had earned the right to be poetic. The auction was quick. Because of the liens and the poor condition of the market, there were few bidders, My LLC won the property for $350,000. It was a steal. 2 days later, the eviction notice was served. I decided to be there for that. I wanted to see the end of the era. I parked my car across the street from the house I grew up in. It looked smaller than I remembered. The lawn, usually manicured to perfection by my mother's obsessive standards, was overgrown. There were weeds choking the rose bushes. A shutter was hanging loose on the second-floor window. It looked like a house that had given up. A moving truck was parked in the driveway. Not a professional moving company, but a U-Haul rental. Hunter and my mother were carrying boxes out. They looked like refugees from their own lives. Hunter was wearing jeans and a t-shirt that had a stain on the front. He looked 10 years older. He was carrying a box of what looked like kitchen appliances. He shoved it into the back of the truck with angry, jerky movements. My mother walked out carrying a lamp. She looked frail. Her hair, usually dyed and styled, was showing gray roots. She set the lamp down on the pavement and leaned against the truck, wiping her forehead. She looked up and saw my car. I rolled down the window. She stared at me. For a moment, I thought she would scream. I thought she would come over and bang on the glass, yelling about how I was an ungrateful daughter. But she didn't. She just looked at me with a profound, crushing sadness. She looked at the woman in the expensive car, the daughter she had sacrificed, the daughter she had stolen from. And she realized finally that she had bet on the wrong child. Hunter saw me too. He stopped loading the truck. He glared at me, his hands balled into fists. He took a step toward the street, but my mother reached out and grabbed his arm. She shook her head. They knew. They knew I was the one who bought the house. They knew I was the one evicting them. I watched as they finished loading. They didn't have much. Most of the furniture had been sold on Craigslist in a desperate attempt to raise cash for legal fees. The house was being stripped bare just as they had tried to strip me. When the truck was full, Hunter slammed the back door shut. The metallic clang echoed down the quiet suburban street. It sounded like a jail cell closing. My mother got into the passenger seat of the truck. Hunter climbed into the driver's seat. The engine sputtered and coughed before roaring to life. A cloud of black exhaust puffed out of the tailpipe. They pulled out of the driveway. They didn't look back. They drove slowly down the street past the neighbors who were peeking out from behind their curtains. They drove away from 30 years of history. They drove away from the site of their crimes. I waited until the truck turned the corner and disappeared from view. Then I opened my car door and stepped out. I walked up the driveway. I walked up the path to the front door. The key was under the mat, just like the sheriff had instructed them to leave it. I picked up the key. It felt heavy in my hand. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house smelled of dust and emptiness. The living room where we used to have Christmas mornings was a vast, hollow space. There were outlines on the carpet where the sofa used to be. There were holes in the walls where pictures had hung. I walked into the kitchen. The counter where Jasmine had leaned against while mocking me was bare. The refrigerator was gone. I walked up the stairs. The wood creaked under my heels. I went to my old bedroom. It was small. The wallpaper was peeling in the corner. This was the room where I had studied late into the night, dreaming of escape. This was the room where I had packed my bags for college, while my mother complained that I was abandoning the family. I stood in the center of the room and listened. I expected to hear the ghosts of the past. I expected to hear the arguments, the insults, the laughter at my expense. But I heard nothing. Silence. Absolute, pure silence. The toxicity was gone. The people who made this house a prison were gone. I walked down the hall to the bathroom. The toilet where Jasmine had flushed my passport was still there. I looked at it. It was just a porcelain bowl. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't a weapon. It was just a fixture in a house that I now owned. I reached out and flushed it. The water swirled. It roared. And then it was gone. I walked back downstairs and out the front door. I locked it behind me. I pulled out my phone and called the contractor I had hired. "It is empty," I said. "Great," the contractor replied. "When do you want us to start the demolition?" "Tomorrow," I said. "I want it leveled. I want the foundation dug up. I want nothing left but dirt." Are you sure, Ms. Jenkins? He asked. It is a solid structure. We could renovate. I looked at the house one last time. No, I said. The foundation is rotten. Tear it down. I hung up. I walked back to my car. I didn't feel sad about destroying my childhood home. I felt like I was performing a mercy killing. I was putting a sick animal out of its misery. I got in the car and started the engine. The radio was playing a song about new beginnings. I drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, toward the city, toward my penthouse, toward my life. The debt was paid. The accounts were closed. And the Vance family had been liquidated. I was finally truly in the black. The Tuesday morning sun beat down on the concrete steps of the Fulton County Courthouse with an unforgiving intensity that felt appropriate for the occasion. This was not a place for second chances. It was a place where failures were cataloged, stamped, and sold to the highest bidder. I sat in the back of my black SUV, the tinted windows rolled up tight, watching the small crowd gather near the sheriff's deputy, who was holding a clipboard. I was sipping a latte that was still piping hot, the air conditioning keeping me cool while my mother's entire life was about to be liquidated in the heat. I was not down there in the crowd. I had learned my lesson about being visible. Instead, I had hired a proxy, a sharp real estate attorney named Mr. Sterling, no relation to the CEO, to represent my interests. He stood near the front, checking his watch, looking bored. To anyone watching, he was just another investor looking to flip a distressed property. To me, he was the executioner. The auctioneer began his rapid-fire chant. I cracked the window just an inch to hear the sound. It was a rhythmic, almost hypnotic cadence that turned tragedy into commerce. 124 Oak Street, the auctioneer shouted. 4-bedroom, 3-bath colonial. Occupied. Sold as is. Opening bid, $200,000. I watched as a few hands went up. These were the vultures, the bottom feeders who bought family homes for pennies on the dollar to turn them into rentals. They did not care about the history of the house. They did not know about the secrets buried in the walls. $250, a man in a sweat-stained polo shirt called out. $275, my proxy countered calmly. The bidding war was short. The house had too many liens on it. The title was messy. Most investors stayed away. But I knew exactly what the liens were because I was the one who had filed half of them. I knew the value of the land. And more importantly, I knew the value of the revenge. 320,000, my proxy said. Going once, the auctioneer yelled. Going twice. Sold to Obsidian Holdings, LLC, for $320,000. I rolled up the window. Obsidian Holdings, a shell company I had formed 3 days ago. The name was a nod to the black volcanic glass that is formed by fire and cools into something razor-sharp. It was fitting. I picked up my phone and called my proxy. Do not file the eviction paperwork yet, I said. I want to deliver the news personally. I drove to the house. It was a 20-minute drive from the courthouse to the suburbs, a journey that took me back through the timeline of my own trauma. As I turned onto the familiar street, I saw the moving truck already in the driveway. It was a U-Haul, the universal symbol of a life in transition. My mother and Hunter were already outside. They had clearly been tipped off by their lawyer that the sale was happening today, and they were trying to salvage what they could before the new owner arrived. I pulled my car up to the curb right in front of the mailbox where I used to stand waiting for college acceptance letters that my mother told me I would never get. I put the car in park but kept the engine running. I wanted them to hear the hum of the expensive engine. I wanted them to see the gleaming paint. I stepped out. The scene was a mirror image of the day they kicked me out, but the reflection was distorted by justice. In Chapter 1 of this saga, I was the one with the suitcase standing on the pavement while they stood on the porch unified in their cruelty, laughing at my misfortune. Now the positions were reversed. I stood on the pavement looking immaculate in a white linen suit and sunglasses. They were the ones scrambling. They were the ones sweating. Hunter was struggling with a heavy box marked kitchen. He looked up when he saw me. His face was gaunt, unshaven. The arrogance that had defined him for years was gone, replaced by a jittery, cornered animal look. "You," Hunter spat, dropping the box. It hit the ground with the sound of breaking glass. "You came to gloat. You happy now? Mom just got the call. The house is sold. We have to be out by sunset." I walked slowly up the driveway. My heels clicked on the concrete. "I know," I said calmly. My mother walked out of the front door. She was carrying a lamp, the same lamp that used to sit on the table where she would balance her checkbook and tell me we couldn't afford to send me to summer camp while paying for Jasmine's cheerleading. She looked frail. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Ayana," she whispered, "why are you doing this? Why are you standing there watching us like this? Have you no heart?" I stopped at the edge of the grass. I looked at the house. The shutters were peeling. The garden was overgrown. Without the facade of perfection to maintain, the house revealed itself for what it truly was. A rotting structure holding up a lie. "I am not just watching Mom," I said. "I am inspecting." Hunter stepped forward, trying to summon some of his old bluster. "Get off the property, Ayana," he shouted. "You do not live here anymore. This is private property until the new owner takes possession. Get lost before I call the cops." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time. "Call them, Hunter," I challenged. "Please. I would love to see Officer Miller again. I am sure he would be thrilled to explain to you how property law works." Hunter faltered. He knew he had no capital left with the police. "Who bought it?" My mother asked, her voice trembling. "Do you know?" "The lawyer said it was some company. Obsidian Holdings. Do you know them? Are they developers? Are they going to tear it down?" She looked at me with a desperate hope. She wanted me to tell her that a nice family was moving in. She wanted to believe that her legacy would continue. I took off my sunglasses. I looked her dead in the eye. "Obsidian Holdings is a single-member LLC, Mom," I said. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. "I am the sole member," I said. My mother dropped the lamp. It didn't shatter. It just fell onto the grass with a dull thud, the shade crumpling like a defeated flag. "You," she gasped. "You bought the house?" I nodded. "I bought the debt. I bought the liens. And this morning on the courthouse steps, I bought the deed." Hunter's mouth fell open. He looked from me to the house and back again. "You own this," he whispered. "I do," I said. "Which means, Hunter, that you are currently shouting at your landlord, and I have a very strict policy about tenants who damage the landscaping." I pointed to the box he had dropped. "Pick that up," I ordered. It was the voice I used in boardrooms. It was the voice of absolute authority. And for the first time in his life, Hunter obeyed me without question. He bent down and picked up the box. "So," my mother started, her hands shaking. "Does that mean—" "Ayana, honey, does that mean we can stay? If you own it, we can work something out. We can pay you rent. Until Jasmine gets out." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had forged my signature on a student loan. I looked at the woman who had watched her other daughter flush my passport and told me to stop being dramatic. She was still trying to negotiate. She still thought that biology was a currency she could spend. "Mom," I said softly, "do you remember what you told me when Jasmine kicked me out?" She stared at me, tears welling up. "You said, it is her house, her rules. You said I had to respect the homeowner." I took a step closer. "Well, this is my house now, and my rule is very simple." I checked my watch. "You have 1 hour to remove your personal belongings. Anything left on the premises at 5 p.m. becomes the property of Obsidian Holdings. And I will tell you right now, Obsidian Holdings has a contract with a demolition crew starting tomorrow morning." "Demolition," Hunter cried. "You are going to knock it down. I am going to scrape it off the face of the earth," I said. My mother let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. She fell to her knees on the grass. You cannot. That is my home. That is where I raised you. No, Mom, I said, looking down at her. That is where you broke me, and I am not keeping the pieces. I walked past them. I walked up the porch steps. I stood at the front door, the threshold I had been forced to cross so many times with my head down. I turned around and looked at them. They looked small. They looked insignificant. 45 minutes, I announced. I opened the door and walked inside. I didn't help them pack. I didn't hold the door. I simply stood in the foyer checking the walls for termite damage, acting like the cold, efficient investor they had forced me to become. I could hear them scrambling outside. I could hear Hunter cursing as he shoved boxes into the truck. I could hear my mother sobbing as she dragged her suitcases down the driveway. They were moving fast now. Fear is a powerful motivator. I walked into the kitchen. I opened the cabinet where we used to keep the good china. It was empty. They had taken everything of value. All that was left was dust and a few dead bugs. I stood by the window and watched them. This was the payoff. This was the moment the script flipped. In Chapter 1, I left with nothing but my dignity. In Chapter 17, they were leaving with nothing but their shame. And I was standing in the center of the wreckage holding the deed, the keys, and the match. They say that adversity reveals the true strength of a marriage. If that is true, then the marriage of Hunter and Jasmine Vance was built on a foundation of wet cardboard. For years, they had presented themselves as the golden couple of our social circle. They were the ones posting perfectly curated photos of date nights. They were the ones lecturing single friends about the sanctity of commitment. But their commitment was not to each other. It was to a lifestyle. And once I repossessed that lifestyle, the love evaporated like a puddle in the Georgia heat. The ink on the eviction notice was barely dry before the ink on the divorce papers was wet. I expected Hunter to at least wait until Jasmine had settled into her federal prison cell. I expected him to play the role of the grieving, supportive husband for a few months, if only to maintain his public image. But Hunter was a parasite, and a parasite cannot survive without a host. With Jasmine in prison and her inheritance gone, she was no longer a source of nutrition. She was dead weight. 2 days after Jasmine was processed into the Federal Correctional Facility in Tallahassee, she received a visitor. It was not her husband coming to hold her hand through the glass. It was a process server. Hunter filed for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences, citing her criminal conviction as a breach of their marital contract. He did not even have the decency to tell her himself. He simply cut the cord and ran. I heard through my lawyer that Jasmine had a breakdown in the visitation room. She screamed until the guards had to restrain her. She had flushed my passport to keep her family together, and in the end, that very act was the blade that severed her marriage. The irony was Shakespearean, but I was not in the audience to applaud. I was too busy watching Hunter's next move. Hunter Vance was a man who defined himself by the women he could manipulate. Without a wife to cook for him and a mother-in-law to pay his bills, he was adrift. He was homeless, unemployed, and legally mandated to pay me nearly $500,000. Most men would have hit rock bottom and started climbing. Hunter decided to start digging. He moved into a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where the neon sign hums all night and the sheets are never quite white. But he did not spend his days looking for work. He spent them looking for a new victim. He spent his remaining cash on a gym membership at an upscale club, not to work out, but to prowl. He found her 3 weeks later. Her name was Patricia. She was a 55-year-old widow who had inherited a dry cleaning empire. She drove a Mercedes convertible and wore too much jewelry. To Hunter, she looked like a life raft. I watched from a distance as he worked his charm on her. He played the role of the misunderstood executive. He told her he was a victim of corporate restructuring. He told her his crazy ex-wife had ruined his finances. He poured on the charm that had once fooled my sister. For a month it seemed to work. I saw photos of them on social media. Hunter driving her car. Hunter drinking wine on her patio. He was living the life of a kept man, wearing clothes she bought him, eating food she paid for. He thought he had won. He thought he had outsmarted the consequences. But Hunter made a fatal error. He forgot that rich women do not stay rich by being stupid. Patricia was lonely, but she was a businesswoman. And when Hunter started asking for loans to start a consulting business, she did what any smart investor would do. She ran a background check. I would have paid good money to be a fly on the wall the night she confronted him. According to the rumors that circulated through the Atlanta grapevine, she threw his clothes out onto the driveway of her mansion in the middle of a dinner party. She had found the court records. She had found the civil judgment. She had found the news articles about his arrest for burglary. She realized she was not dating a fallen executive. She was dating a thief and a fraud. Hunter was back on the street that night, but this time he had burned his last bridge. He had no wife. He had no mother-in-law with a house. He had no new girlfriend. And he had a garnishment order from the court that was about to catch up with him. I had instructed Marcus to be aggressive with the collections. We monitored his social security number for any sign of employment. For months there was nothing. Hunter was too proud to work a regular job. He thought manual labor was beneath him. He thought he was too good to punch a clock. But hunger is a persuasive negotiator. 6 months after the house was sold, I received a notification from the court. A garnishable income source had been located. Hunter Vance had finally found employment. I opened the file expecting to see a sales job or maybe a position at a car dealership. But when I saw the employer name, I laughed out loud in my office. Global Logistics Solutions. It sounded fancy, but I knew who they were. They were a third-party staffing agency that provided temporary manual labor for warehouses. Hunter Vance, the man who used to scream at warehouse workers for being too slow, the man who bragged about being a regional manager, was now a Tier 1 fulfillment associate. I could not resist. I had to see it. I drove out to the industrial park where the warehouse was located. It was a massive windowless concrete box surrounded by barbed wire fences. It was a hot July day. The asphalt was radiating heat waves. I parked across the street near the employee exit and waited for the shift change. At 4:00, the buzzer sounded. A stream of exhausted workers poured out of the side door. They were wearing neon safety vests and steel-toed boots. They looked drained. And there he was. Hunter walked out of the door. He looked different. He had lost the soft, doughy look of a man who eats too many expense-account dinners. He was thin, almost gaunt. His face was sunburnt. He was wearing a vest that was too big for him, and his name tag hung crookedly from his chest. He was not walking with a swagger anymore. He was shuffling. He looked at his feet as he walked toward the bus stop. His BMW was long gone. He was commuting by public transit. I watched him sit on the metal bench. He pulled a sandwich out of a paper bag. It looked squashed. He ate it quickly, looking around nervously, as if he was afraid someone would recognize him. This was the man who had told me I was nothing. This was the man who had said I was just an assistant. Now he was the lowest rung on the corporate ladder. He was lifting boxes. He was scanning barcodes. He was asking permission to use the bathroom. I rolled down my window. The air conditioner from my car blew cool air onto my face. Hunter looked up. He saw me. He saw the car. He saw the expensive sunglasses. For a second, I thought he would get angry. I thought he would scream or throw his sandwich, but he did not. He just stared at me. His shoulders slumped. The light in his eyes was gone. It was the look of a man who had been thoroughly, completely broken. He looked away. He turned his head and stared at the graffiti on the bus stop wall. He could not bear to look at the reflection of his own failure. I did not say anything. There was nothing left to say. The universe had spoken. Karma had delivered its verdict. I rolled up the window and drove away. As I merged onto the highway, heading back to my penthouse, I thought about the concept of the golden couple. They had glittered on the surface, but underneath they were just brass, and brass turns green when it is exposed to the elements. Hunter was working in a warehouse to pay off a debt he could never clear. Jasmine was sitting in a federal prison cell, wearing a jumpsuit that matched her husband's safety vest. They were finally matched perfectly. They were both trapped in cages of their own making. I turned up the radio. The song playing was upbeat and loud. I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel. I had a date tonight, a real date with a man who owned his own business and had never asked me for a dime. I had a life that was full and authentic. I had lost a family, but I had gained my freedom. And looking back at the warehouse in my rearview mirror, I knew that was a trade I would make 1,000 times over. The golden couple had shattered, and the pieces were sweeping up the floor. The Federal Correctional Institution in Tallahassee does not look like a place where redemption happens. It looks like a warehouse for broken things. The drive from the airport had been long and humid, the Florida landscape passing by in a blur of green swamps and strip malls. I sat in the back of the rental car, smoothing the fabric of my skirt, feeling a strange kind of numbness. I was not here to gloat. I was not here to twist the knife. I had already won the war. This visit was simply to sign the peace treaty with my own conscience. I walked through the series of heavy steel doors, the buzzing of the electric locks vibrating in my teeth. The air inside smelled of industrial cleaner and stale cabbage. It was the smell of a life paused. I checked my belongings at the front desk. My phone, my purse, my keys. I was stripped of the armor of my success, leaving me with nothing but my name and my memories. The guard led me to the visitation room. It was a large cafeteria-style space with bolted-down tables and plastic chairs. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. I sat at table number 4 and waited. When the door on the far side opened, I almost didn't recognize her. Jasmine had always been the vibrant one, the loud one, the one who took up all the oxygen in the room. She was the sister who spent hours on her hair, who wouldn't leave the house without a full face of makeup, who wore her entitlement like a designer coat. The woman who shuffled toward me was a stranger. She was thin, dangerously thin. Her beige jumpsuit hung off her frame like a sack. Her hair, once a glossy blonde mane that she tossed dismissively, was pulled back into a severe, greasy bun. The dark roots had grown out inches, creating a stark line that marked exactly how long she had been away from the world. Her skin was gray and sallow, pockmarked from stress and poor nutrition. She sat down opposite me. She didn't look me in the eye. She looked at her hands, which were resting on the metal table. Her fingernails were bitten down to the quick. "Hello, Jasmine," I said. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet room. Jasmine looked up. Her eyes were dull. The spark of malice, the fire of jealousy, it was all gone. Extinguished by the reality of federal time. "You came," she whispered. Her voice was raspy. "I didn't think you would come. I told you I would visit once I said. I keep my word." She let out a dry, hacking cough. "You look good, Ayana," she said, her eyes scanning my face, my clothes, my diamond stud earrings. "You look expensive." I didn't apologize for it. I didn't try to dim my light to make her comfortable. I had done that for 30 years, and it had gotten me nothing but betrayed. "I am doing well," I said simply. Jasmine leaned forward. The movement was jerky, desperate. "It is hell in here, Ayana," she hissed. "You have no idea. The noise, the women, I can't sleep. I have to work in the laundry. Me, scrubbing sheets. My hands are bleeding." She held them up. They were red and raw. I looked at them without blinking. "It is honest work, Jasmine," I said, "for the first time in your life." She flinched as if I had slapped her. "Don't be cruel," she whimpered. "I have learned my lesson. I swear. I sit in that cell every night and I think about what I did. I was stupid. I listened to Mom. I listened to Hunter." She paused, looking around to make sure the guard wasn't listening. "Hunter divorced me," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Did you know that? He served me papers the first week. He didn't even write a letter. He just threw me away." "I know," I said. "Hunter is a survivor. He cuts off dead weight." Dead weight, Jasmine repeated. Is that what I am? Dead weight. I didn't answer. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. Ayana, please, she said, her voice dropping to a begging tone. I get out in 14 months with good behavior. I have nowhere to go. Mom lost the house. Hunter is gone. I have no money. I have a felony record. Who is going to hire me? Where am I going to live? She reached across the table, trying to touch my hand. I pulled back. You have the penthouse, she said rapidly. You have so much room. You could let me stay in the guest room, just for a few months, until I get on my feet. I can cook. I can clean. I won't be a burden. I promise. I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had flushed my passport, the sister who had tried to sabotage my career, the sister who had laughed while I was being humiliated. And now she wanted to sleep down the hall from me. She wanted to crawl back into the nest she had set on fire. No, I said. Jasmine's face crumpled. Ayana, please. I am your sister. Biologically, yes, I said. But sisterhood is a relationship, Jasmine, and you broke that relationship. You didn't just break it, you pulverized it, you flushed it down a toilet. But Jackson, she cried, playing her final card. Think about Jackson. He needs his mother. If I don't have a stable address, the state won't let me have custody. Do you want your nephew to grow up in the system? Do you want him to suffer because you were too stubborn to help me? I leaned forward. Jackson is with Hunter's parents in Ohio, I said. I speak to them weekly. I send them checks to cover his therapy and his school. He is doing well, Jasmine. He is sleeping through the night. He is not hearing screaming matches. He is not watching his mother get arrested. He is safe. I took a deep breath, and as for custody, I continued. You need to focus on yourself before you can focus on a child. You cannot save someone else when you are drowning. Jasmine slammed her hand on the table. The guard took a step toward us. You are enjoying this, she shrieked, her voice cracking. You love seeing me like this. You bought Mom's house just to tear it down. Who does that? You are a monster. I sat perfectly still. I bought the house to erase the debt, I said calmly, and I tore it down because the foundation was rotten, just like this conversation. I reached into my bag, which the guard had inspected and allowed me to bring in. I pulled out a paperback book. It wasn't a checkbook. It wasn't a key to an apartment. It was a simple book with a blue cover. I slid it across the metal table. Jasmine looked at it with disgust. What is this? She asked. It is a guide, I said. It is called Restarting Your Life After Incarceration. It lists resources for housing, job training programs for felons, and support groups. She stared at the book as if it were a dead rat. A book, she spat. You are giving me a book. You have millions of dollars and you give me a book. I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. I am giving you the truth, Jasmine, I said. I looked down at her. She looked so small in that chair, so angry and so lost. Do you remember what you used to tell me? I asked. Jasmine glared at me. You used to tell me that I didn't understand real work, I said. You used to tell me that being a mother was the hardest job in the world. You used to use that as an excuse for everything. For being lazy, for being mean, for demanding that I serve you. Jasmine looked away, biting her lip. I leaned down, bringing my face close to the glass partition that separated our worlds, metaphorically speaking. You were wrong, Jasmine, I said softly. She looked up at me. Being a mother is hard, I admitted. But do you know what is harder? I tapped the cover of the book with my manicured finger. Being a decent person, I said. Jasmine's mouth fell open. She looked stunned. Becoming a decent person when you have spent your whole life being selfish. That is the hardest job on earth, I said. It requires humility. It requires work. It requires you to stop blaming everyone else for your problems. I stepped back. Read the book, Jasmine, I said. Or don't. Flush it down the toilet for all I care. But don't call me when you get out. I turned around. Ayana, she screamed after me. You can't leave me here, Ayana. I walked toward the heavy steel door. I didn't look back. I heard her sobbing. I heard her cursing my name. But the sounds were fading. The guard opened the door for me. I stepped out into the hallway. The heavy metal slammed shut behind me with a decisive clack. The silence in the hallway was beautiful. I walked back to the intake desk to collect my belongings. I put on my watch. I picked up my purse. I checked my phone. I had 3 missed calls from my office and a text from my fiancé asking what I wanted for dinner. I walked out of the prison and into the humid Florida afternoon. The sun was shining. The air tasted sweet. I had visited the ghost of my past, and I had left it exactly where it belonged, behind bars. I got into the rental car and started the engine. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt like I had finally truly completed the assignment. I drove toward the airport. I was flying home. Not to the house of my childhood, but to the home I had built. A home with a solid foundation. A home where passports were safe, where vases were cherished, and where the only flush I heard was the sound of the past washing away. The sunlight in Monte Carlo hits differently when you own the view. Last year, when I sat on this same terrace at the Hotel de Paris, the light felt blinding and aggressive, exposing every insecurity I had about my life and my career. I was terrified that my imposter syndrome was written all over my face. But today, the golden afternoon sun felt like a warm embrace, a spotlight that I had finally earned the right to stand in. I adjusted my sunglasses and leaned back in the plush chair. The Mediterranean Sea was a sheet of hammered turquoise below us, dotted with white yachts that looked like toys from this height. I took a sip of my champagne. It was a 1998 Dom Perignon crisp and impossibly expensive. Last year, I drank it to calm my nerves. Today, I was drinking it to celebrate. Across the table from me sat Marcus. Not Marcus, my lawyer, but Marcus, my fiancé. He looked devastatingly handsome in a linen suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at me. There was a calmness in his eyes that I had never found in my family. It was the look of a man who knew exactly who I was. The ruthless businesswoman, the wounded daughter, the survivor, and loved all of it. "Happy anniversary," Marcus said, raising his glass. I smiled, clinking my flute against his. "Technically, the anniversary is tomorrow," I said. "That is the day the deal officially closed." "No," Marcus corrected me gently. "I am talking about the real anniversary. 1 year ago today, you walked out of your apartment without a passport and decided to stop being a victim. That is the day worth celebrating." I looked down at the bubbles rising in my glass. He was right. It had been exactly 365 days since Jasmine stood in my bathroom and pressed that flush button. 365 days since my mother told me I was being dramatic. 365 days since Hunter told me I was nothing. In that year, I had doubled my net worth. I had become a managing partner at Horizon Capital. I had bought a villa in Tuscany. And I had found a man who treated me like an equal, not an ATM. But more importantly, I had excised the tumor that had been killing me slowly for 3 decades. Marcus reached across the table and took my hand. His skin was warm against mine. "I got an update from the private investigator this morning," Marcus said softly. "Do you want to hear it? Or should we leave it in the past?" I took a breath. I didn't need to hear it. I didn't need to know. But a part of me, the part that had been told for years that I would fail without them, needed the confirmation. "Tell me," I said. Marcus nodded. "Jasmine was released to a halfway house in Tallahassee last week," he said. "She is working at a diner as a dishwasher. She has to pay restitution to the court, so her wages are garnished. She is living in a shared room with 3 other women. She tried to call Hunter, but his number is disconnected." I felt a flicker of pity, but it was distant, like watching a sad movie on a plane. Dishwashing. It was honest work. It was the kind of work she used to mock. Maybe, just maybe, the soap and water would clean her character the way she was cleaning those plates. "And Hunter?" I asked. "Hunter was fired from the warehouse," Marcus said. "Attendance issues. He is currently working as a driver for a rideshare app. He is living in his car. And Mom. Marcus squeezed my hand. She is in a state-run assisted living facility near the airport, he said. It is not luxury, but she has a roof over her head. She spends most of her time telling the nurses that her daughter is a famous executive who is coming to rescue her any day now. They think she has dementia, but we know it is just delusion. I nodded slowly. They were all exactly where their choices had led them. They were living in the ruins of the lives they had tried to build on my back. I looked out at the horizon. I felt light. For years I had carried their expectations, their debts, and their cruelty like a heavy backpack. Now I was floating. "Let's order lunch," I said, signaling the waiter. "I am starving." We ordered the lobster and a second bottle of wine. We laughed. We talked about our upcoming wedding in Lake Como. We talked about the new merger I was eyeing in Tokyo. We didn't talk about the past. But the past has a way of trying to claw its way back into the present. My phone, which was sitting face down on the white tablecloth, vibrated. It was a long, insistent buzz. I ignored it. Only a few people had this number. My assistant Charles Sterling and Marcus, and they were all accounted for. It buzzed again, and again. Marcus looked at it. "You should check," he said. "It might be the firm." I picked up the phone. It wasn't the firm. It was a number I didn't recognize, a prepaid burner phone number. I opened the message. "Ayana, please, it is Mom. I know you blocked my other numbers. I am cold. The food here is terrible. I just need $50. Just 50. Hunter won't answer me. Jasmine is gone. You are the only one left. Please, baby. I am your mother. Family comes first." I stared at the screen. The words blurred for a second. Family comes first. That phrase, that weaponized phrase. She had used it to make me give up my room. She had used it to make me co-sign loans. She had used it to make me silence my own voice. And here she was, sitting in a sad room, typing into a cheap phone, still trying to fire that weapon. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't apologize for stealing my identity. She didn't say sorry for the house. She just wanted $50. She thought the connection between us was financial. She thought that because we shared blood, I owed her my resources. I looked up at Marcus. He saw the look on my face. "Her?" he asked. I nodded. "Do you want me to handle it?" Marcus asked. "I can have the facility confiscate her phone." "No," I said. "I will handle it." I looked back at the phone. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I could type a furious paragraph. I could tell her that she had lost the right to call me daughter. I could tell her about the villa and the champagne and the man who loved me. I could rub her nose in my success. But that would mean I still cared. That would mean she still had power over my emotions. Indifference is the only true freedom. I didn't type a reply. I didn't send an angry emoji. I simply tapped the small eye icon in the corner of the screen. I scrolled down to the bottom of the contact card. The red letters stared back at me. "Block this caller." I pressed it. A pop-up appeared. "You will not receive phone calls, messages, or FaceTime from people on the block list." I pressed confirm. The message disappeared from my screen. The connection was severed. The line was dead. I put the phone back down on the table, face down. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked. I smiled, and this time it was the brightest, most genuine smile I had worn in years. "Everything is perfect," I said. I picked up my glass of champagne. I looked at the bubbles dancing to the surface. "You know," I said to Marcus, looking him in the eye, "I used to cry about that passport. I used to think that flushing it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I thought she had destroyed my identity." Marcus listened, his expression intense and loving. "But she didn't destroy it," I continued. "She revealed it." I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like victory. "A torn passport can be replaced," I said, my voice steady and strong. "You fill out a form, you pay a fee, you get a new booklet. It is just paper and ink, but a torn character. A soul that is ripped apart by greed and jealousy, that cannot be taped back together. I looked out at the ocean, thinking of the water swirling in that toilet bowl back in Atlanta. That flush didn't trap me, I said. It set me free. It washed away the guilt. It washed away the obligation. It washed away the fear. That toilet flush washed my life cleaner than it has ever been. Marcus raised his glass. To clean slates, he said. To clean slates, I echoed. We drank. The waiter arrived with the lobster. The sun began to dip lower, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold colors that reminded me of royalty. I was not the assistant anymore. I was not the little sister. I was not the scapegoat. I was Ayanna Jenkins, and my story was just beginning. I turned to the camera, breaking the fourth wall for the final time. You might be watching this and feeling trapped. You might have a family member who tells you that you are nothing, or a partner who tries to dim your light. You might be afraid to walk away because you think you owe them something. Let me tell you this. You owe them nothing. You owe yourself everything. If they burn a bridge, let it burn, and then use the light of the fire to see your way to a better future. Do not be afraid of the flush. Sometimes you have to let the old life go down the drain so the new one can flow in. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever had to stand up and reclaim your worth from the people who were supposed to protect it, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to know that it is okay to choose yourself. My name is Ayanna. I am in Monaco. The champagne is cold, the future is bright, and my phone is on silent. Thank you for watching, and remember, the best revenge isn't anger. It is a life so beautiful that you don't even have time to look back. I signaled for the check. It was time to go shopping. I needed a new passport holder. Maybe something in gold, fade to black. This journey taught me that shared DNA is not a license for abuse. For years, I let family obligation keep me small, but I learned that you cannot save people who are determined to drown you. When Jasmine destroyed my passport, she didn't trap me. She forced me to finally choose myself. Real freedom isn't just about financial success. It is about the courage to cut the cord. Never set yourself on fire just to keep others warm, especially when they are the ones holding the match. Your dignity is the one asset you must never compromise. If you have ever had to walk away from toxic family to save your peace, hit the like button and subscribe. Share your story in the comments below. I want to hear how you won.